Ever wish you had a mentor who teaches you exactly what you need at your pace whenever you want? Yeah, same. I struggled to find the right info, and even when I did, it rarely clicked. And feedback? Either non-existent or ridiculously expensive. Hey, I'm Adrian, and today we're building Converso, an AI-powered learning companion. It's your personal education platform, real-time, voice-driven, fully customizable, and most importantly, monetizable. You can think of this project as a gateway into building software as a service apps. Whether you want to launch your own app, upgrade your dev skills, or ship something that actually makes money. In this course, I'm giving you the exact tech stack, workflows, and knowledge you need to build any SaaS business, from idea to production ready in under 7 days. You'll walk away with a repeatable system that helps you go from MVP to monetization fast. In this tutorial, you'll build secure sign up and sign in with an intuitive authentication system, real-time, voice-driven lessons for smooth and interactive learning experiences. Typically very practical, but you can also make it teach you whatever you want. So if you want to learn about supply and demand from Charles the Cheddar Capitalist, well, you can do that too.
Hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about supply, demand, and market forces in the cheese industry.
Well, let's dive right in.
All right, let's start with demand. Why do people demand cheese? It's because they believe it adds flavor to their meals, right? Demand is all about how many people want cheese and how much they're willing to pay for it. Does that make sense so far?
You seem to really like cheese.
You cheddar believe it. Cheese is the perfect way to explain economics. Now, can you tell me what might increase the demand for cheese?
Well, more people liking cheese.
Exactly. If cheese becomes the Gouda trend, demand increases.
Gouda trend.
Ha ha! I see you caught that pun. If cheese becomes popular, demand rises.
Personalized voice-powered courses tailored to your users' goals. A modern, responsive UI for a familiar, yet custom experience. Responsive on all devices. A search to help users easily find what they're looking for. Scalable Postgres database to ensure the platform grows as user demand increases. Bookmarking and session history features to track progress and revisit key lessons. A flexible subscription system supporting multiple plans with the ability to lock certain features based on their tier. And most importantly, with billing and payment processing, allowing your users to give you money in seconds. And while you build all of this, you'll also learn how to work with some of the best free tools in modern web development, starting with Next.js for building scalable and performant server-driven websites with built-in routing. And by the way, if you want to take things to the next level, the updated Ultimate Next.js course is now available on JS Mastery Pro. We'll also take advantage of Supabase, an open-source Postgres platform offering real-time data, scalable storage, and instant APIs, perfect for running a modern SaaS app backend. TypeScript will come into play to help maintain a clean, robust codebase across the entire architecture. And since voice interaction is key for modern applications, you'll get your AI voice agents up and running in minutes using Vapi, a powerful voice API platform that connects to any model and scales to millions of calls. You can integrate it into any SaaS app to immediately make it stand out. We'll use Clerk to easily integrate sign up, sign in, and profile management. But on top of Auth, this is what I'm very excited about. For the first time ever, we'll also dive into Clerk Billing, integrating with Stripe and allowing you to implement subscriptions within all of your apps super easily. While implementing it for this project, a JSM developer said that it's awesome, cheap, robust, and that if he ever decided to build his own SaaS app, he'd go with Clerk. And I think the same. Functionality is the key, but the UI is what people see. So while building this application, you'll also develop a modern, responsive interface using Tailwind CSS and ChatCN, which became the standard for spinning up new SaaS apps with a UI UX that everyone loves and understands. We also have to integrate Sentry for real-time error tracking and performance monitoring. Because once your app is in production, it's not like your users will take the time to explore and report the bugs, at least not in a useful way. Instead, they'll just stop the subscription and quit. So to make sure that never happens, Sentry helps you quickly identify and fix issues, ensuring your SaaS app always runs smoothly. And here's the exciting part. All of the tools we'll use in this project are free to get started with. Together, we'll create a sleek, interactive SaaS that boosts your portfolio, helps you land your next job, or create your own SaaS business. Oh, and if this video got you excited, you're gonna love what I prepared next. Alongside this video, I've just dropped a pro build and launch your SaaS in under 7 days course. It's your step-by-step blueprint for turning any idea into a live SaaS app fast. In the course, I'll zoom out from this LMS build and walk you through the full process, from ideation, design, dev stack, deployment, monetization, and beyond. And to help you hit the ground running, very soon, I'll also include a fully pre-configured starter repo ready to clone, make it your own, and launch. The link is in the description. You can get access to it by becoming a pro member. And if you don't want to pay anything before you actually build it, you can get it for free through a 7-day free trial. Enjoy! But now, let's dive right into this build. To get started creating our SaaS, let's first spin up our new Next.js application. Used by some of the world's largest companies, Next.js enables you to create high-quality web applications with the power of React components. The installation couldn't be simpler. It's just npx create next app, add latest. I already opened up a new project within my IDE, so what I can do is come right here and paste the command we just copied, but I'll add a / at the end so it creates an application within the current folder that I'm within, and press enter. It's going to ask you whether you want to install the installer, so I'll say yes, go ahead, and then it'll ask us a couple of questions, such as would you like to use TypeScript? Well, that's going to be an easy yes. We also want to use ESLint to keep our codebase clean. Tailwind CSS is a big yes from me. No need for a source directory, everything is fine where it is. App Router is a definite yes. TurboPack to speed up our development time is going to be another yes. No need to customize the import alias, it's fine as it is by default. And that's it. The dependencies are getting installed. And while I was installing these dependencies, you might have noticed that I was using an IDE and not a typical text editor. And this change will be even more apparent as we continue developing our apps, as whenever some new cool pop-up shows up that auto does something for you, which a typical text editor doesn't, well, it's most likely coming from WebStorm. And as of recently, it became completely free for non-commercial use. Before, you had to pay a lot of money to be able to use it, and it was reserved only for large corporations, but now you can download it completely for free. Oh, and with it, to improve our productivity, we'll also use Junie, helping us develop our apps faster. It's built right within the IDE, it can analyze your code base, and just immediately speed up your workflow significantly by offering some suggestions on code structure and logic, doing things for you, or just making sure that your code is clean, consistent, and production ready. So while you're here, you might download that one as well. Now, at the beginning, I want to take a second to explain all of the different tools that we'll be using, as that way you'll have complete clarity of why we're using a specific tool and how it'll help us. We'll also deal with some initial setup and account creation first, so that later on, we can focus on solely coding this SaaS. First up, Tailwind CSS. It's a utility-first CSS framework packed with utility classes. In simple words, it just speeds up the way you style things while still allowing you the complete flexibility of native CSS. It'll help us with keeping our app responsive, applying a dark mode if that's what you like. It'll also help us with theming to make sure that our styles are consistent, and it has some built-in animations. But most importantly, you can see that all of these websites are completely different, which means that it speeds up our workflow, but it doesn't come at a cost of making our apps look boring. Oh look, Clerk is one of the websites using Tailwind. And in this course, we'll be using Clerk within our app. Sure, we'll use Clerk's Auth, allowing us to simply authenticate and manage our users. But exclusively in this course, I'll teach you how to implement Clerk Billing. It builds on top of Auth, and in my opinion, is just so much more exciting and more powerful, as it'll allow us to easily implement subscriptions within our applications. So click the Clerk link down in the description to be able to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing. And let me tell you a bit about it. You know that integrating payments is typically a pain in the ass? Well, with Clerk, it's going to be super simple. You can just insert the pricing table, it'll hook up with a user that's already logged in, and you'll be able to keep track of their plan, subscription, and more. It also comes with some helpers allowing you to control access based on the customer's plan. And best of all, it is completely powered by Stripe, the leading payment processor in the world. Now, of course, you might be wondering, if they're abstracting all of those payment functionalities, how much is it going to cost? To be completely honest, I was a bit scared that it might be a lot because they're taking the burden of managing the payments, but it is completely free to get started with, and you only have to pay an extra 0.7% for each transaction. That's super reasonable in my opinion, and of course we'll integrate it within our Next.js application. So when you click that link in the description, click sign in, choose your provider, and you'll be redirected to your dashboard where we can quickly create a new application. I'll call it JSM SaaS app. There are many providers to choose from, but in this case, we'll stick with the basics, email and Google, and very soon we'll implement it right within our app. Now, alongside Clerk, we'll also use ShadCN UI. It is built on top of Tailwind, but also provides us some of the most commonly used components so that we can develop our apps even faster. Need a little badge, a button, or a whole calendar that would take you days to develop? Well, you have it right here, exposed as a single component, which you can just use within your application. Oh, and the main functionality of our app, the conversational courses, they'll be powered by Vapi. So click the Vapi link down in the description and let's set it up. Head over to sign up, choose your provider, and you'll be redirected right within your dashboard. Now, Vapi is completely free to get started with, but if you head over to billing and go to apply a coupon and type JS Mastery 200, you'll get 200 extra minutes. Not that you'll need them as the free plan is generous enough, but who knows? If you decide to use Vapi for your own SaaS, it might come in handy. And there's Sentry. To keep your application running smoothly, we'll use it for error tracking and performance monitoring, allowing us to catch errors when your app is in production so that your users stay happy for a long time. And since I've been using Sentry for a long time, they decided to give you an extra 50,000 errors with the code JS Mastery. Once again, their free plan is super generous, so you might not even need them, but if you decide to use it on your apps in the future, it'll surely come in handy. So just fill in the details and select JS Mastery as the coupon. Once you do that, you'll be redirected to your dashboard, and very soon I'll show you how we can integrate it within this and your future SaaS applications. But with that in mind, our Next.js app has now been set up, so we can explore the file and folder structure that has been created for us. Primarily, we can take a look into the app folder, and you'll see that right now there is a lot of boilerplate code, which we don't really need. So we could go ahead and just remove it, but what I want to do instead is remove the entire app folder. So just delete it, and then in the description down below, you can find the video kit for the current project. So visit it, and right here, you'll be able to find the Figma design for the entire application. This will be super useful when we're developing it, because you'll be able to take a look at the existing pages and know exactly what's about to come next. Or maybe you can develop it on your own to try your skills and then verify the implementation with me later on in the video. Alongside the Figma design, you can also find the Discord channel to get help or get the full source code completely for free. But what we need to do next is click on the assets right here. Once you visit this page, you'll find the assets folder, so simply right-click it and click download. Once you download it, simply unzip it, head over into it, and you'll find different folders that you can just drag and drop into your app. But let's first make sure to delete the public folder as well, because it has some icons which we won't need. So I'll just delete it as well. And then I'll select all of these folders and simply drag them within our application. There we go. Now, you might be thinking that I'm giving you the entire app already, but that's really not the case. If you check out the app folder, you'll notice that we have the same exact files that we had before, but I just replaced them with a converso icon. Then, in the page.tsx, I have left the completely empty page, just removed the entire boilerplate code, and then in the layout, I just modified the font and the title. Everything else is just completely bare bones, besides the styles. I did take some time to extract all of the primary colors from our Figma design, and I put them right here so we can use them much more seamlessly within our application. And I created some utility classes that allow us to very easily style larger portions of our application so that we don't have to crowd our JSX with very long class names. Rather, we can just use the home section keyword, for example. If you want to learn how you would go ahead and extract all of these class names from a Figma design into a dedicated CSS file, you might want to check out the Tailwind CSS course. I'm actually recording it alongside this video right now, and it should be ready soon. In any case, I'll link it somewhere down below. With that in mind, here we're using one package called TW Animate CSS. So we have to go ahead and install it. I'll just increase the font size a bit, and I'll create a second terminal right here where we can run these installation commands. So I'll just say npm I TW Animate CSS, and now it's no longer complaining. Next, alongside the app folder, I also provided some constants, and here we have arrays of different data points that we can use within our application. For example, we can have different subjects that we can create conversational courses on, and dedicated colors for each subject. We have different voices that we can use, and just some dummy data so that we can very easily start focusing on the UI, and then later on, once we implement the functionality, we can ditch this dummy data and start using the real data. I also created a lib folder with a utils file where we have one major utility function called configure assistant, and we'll uncomment it later on and go through it together as we start implementing voice functionalities within our application. Alongside that, we also have the public folder for all of the icons, images, and everything else that we'll be using. You can see some call to action images right here, the limit, and the logo itself. And finally, we have some of the types that we'll use for our application. For example, we can say that subject will be one of these different things, and then we can define different interfaces for different functionalities from within our application. I'll show you how to implement all of these in action very, very soon. But with that in mind, now we are ready to install ShadCN. I already told you what it is. It is a component library that will give us some default components, but it'll allow us to style them seamlessly. So to install it in Next.js, we need to use the guide for Tailwind v4 because we're using the latest version of Tailwind, and we're going to use npm, so you can simply run npx shadcn add latest init. So heading over into my terminal, I'll run npx shadcn add latest init, and it's going to ask us a couple of questions. We're going to use the neutral base color. We can use the legacy peer deps to install some packages. Don't worry if this happens. There's a little mismatch in dependency versions between Tailwind v4 and React 19, so for that reason, we'll have to use these legacy peer deps to make sure that these two packages collaborate together. And there we go, ShadCN has been set up, so what do you say that we put it to the test? I'll head over into my app, page.tsx, and I'll try to render, first of all, an h1 that has a class name of text-2xl and underline. And by the way, you can see how WebStorm automatically tells me what styles this specific Tailwind CSS class name is applying. This comes pre-built into WebStorm, but it can also be installed as a package or an extension. Just search for Tailwind CSS. Here we can say, welcome to my SaaS app. And just below, we want to render a ShadCN component. For example, a button. But here's the thing. By default, just by installing ShadCN, you won't be able to get any of these components right in. Instead, what you have to do is add those components. One by one, only the ones that you want to actually use. So I'll run npx shadcn add latest button, and you can use this legacy peer deps with every command, and it's going to install it within a second. And now, if you try to render a button and press enter, it'll actually pick it directly from your code base, add components UI button. So if you head over to components UI, you'll see that a new button has been created for you. There's a lot of code right here, but you don't have to touch it. You just need to use it within your application. So I'll just make it say something like, let's get started. Perfect. Now, if I save this, in my initial terminal, I'll run npm run dev to run our application on localhost 3000. And once you open up your localhost 3000 in the browser, if you zoom in a bit, you should be able to see this large heading with this custom font underlined that says welcome to my SaaS app, and then a nice looking ShadCN button with a hover effect that says let's get started. So what I'll do for now is put my browser to the right side of my screen, and then I'll put my editor so that it doesn't go over the screen. And that way we can take a look at both the code and the implementation at the same time. And with that in mind, our setup is now complete. So in the next lesson, we can dive right into creating different pages for our application and implementing the routing. That's pretty exciting because we're finally getting a chance to dive right into this nice looking codebase that so far, let's be honest, we have just been setting up. So let's implement routing next. Remember that video kit and the Figma design I showed you a bit before? Well, now we'll need it. So open it up and taking a look at the screens that we have right here, let's try to figure out which pages we need within our application so we can implement the routes for those pages. Starting off with our homepage. We'll surely need that one, and thankfully, we already have it. It is right here under app page.tsx. After that, we'll also need the sign in so that our users can actually sign in. So for now, let's create it right here within app and add a new folder, and let's call it sign-in, and within it, create a new page.tsx. And for now, you can simply run RAFCE within every single one of these pages we'll create, which will spin up a new empty React functional component. Now, how do we get to this page, this sign in page within our browser? Well, you'll have to head over to localhost 3000/sign in, and that's it. And you should be able to see a small sign in text right at the top left. Now, this is working right out of the box with Next.js because of its file-based routing. So whenever you create a new folder with a specific name and create a special file within it called page.tsx, it'll expose that route to the browser /sign in this case, and it'll render the contents of that page. Okay, what else do we have between the sign in and the homepage? Well, we're gonna have a companion library page where we can explore all of the learning courses that other people have created so far. So we can create it by creating a new folder right within our app, and we can call it companions, as in learning companions, and within it, I'll create a new page.tsx and run RAFCE. This one I'll call companions library, and we no longer need the import of React within Next.js applications. It works without it as well. Next, we'll need a build a companion form. So let's create it. We can create it within the same folder. So that's gonna be within companions, but I'll create a new folder within it and I'll call it new. And then within that folder, I'll create another page which will host that form. So just create it and run RAFCE within it, which will quickly spin up a new functional component. We can rename it to something like new companion, and we can clear this React import. Next, we'll have a companion or a conversational course lesson page. So let's create it right here under companions. This time not new, but actually we'll create a new dynamic route. And in Next.js, you can do that by creating a new folder and wrap it with square brackets. Within it, you can define the URL parameter that you want to have for this specific route. In this case, I'll call it ID. And within ID, I'll create a new page.tsx. Once again, here you can run RAFCE, and I'll rename it to companion session, because here we'll actually be learning from that learning companion. Next, we'll have our profile page, or we can call it my learning journey. So I'll create it right here, not within companions anymore, but within a new folder, which I will call my-journey. And within my journey, we can create a new page.tsx, run RAFCE, and rename it to maybe profile page like this, or just profile. Perfect. And finally, we have a subscription page. Here, we'll actually be able to upgrade our user tier. So let's create it by creating a new folder right here within our app, and I'll call it subscription. And within subscription, I'll create a new page.tsx, run RAFCE, and we can call it subscription. Perfect. These are all the different screens that we'll need within our application. And now we have actually added them within our application. So now if you want to head over to, for example, my journey, you can do that very easily, and it navigates you to a profile page. Or maybe if you want to go to companions and visit a specific session, you can do that very easily and head over to any one of these internal routes as well. Wonderful. So with that in mind, we have now not only set up the app configuration, but also the initial routes of the application. So to further improve your learning experience, what I want to do at this point is publish this project to GitHub. You can head over to github.com/new, and this will bring you to a new repository page. Now, why are we already publishing to GitHub? Well, a better question would be, why not? When you're developing your SaaS applications, the biggest mistake you can make is just to keep developing it locally. Many things can go wrong and you can lose access to your code base. Or even worse, maybe you change some code and it breaks the application and you don't know how to revert it. But if you continuously make commits over to GitHub, you'll be able to revert to a previous stage of your application at any point in time. So let's actually create a new repo and I'll call it SaaS app. I'll leave it public and click create. Once you do that, you can follow these steps right here or just follow what I'm doing. Within the terminal, you can run git init, git add dot to add all of the currently saved files within it, git commit -m initial commit, git branch m main, git remote add origin, and then copy the link to your GitHub repo, and finally git push u origin main. And this will nicely push the code that you have added so far over to GitHub, so if you reload, you'll be able to see all of your code right here. Now, this will be super useful for those of you that are watching this course over on JS Mastery Pro. Why? Because this entire course will be split into individual lessons. So you'll be able to see exactly what we're doing lesson to lesson. And for each lesson, you'll be able to read a summary as well as the entire transcript of that video. Then you'll be able to test your knowledge with a quiz. And most importantly, you'll have access to a link pointing to the GitHub commit containing only the code for that lesson. I mean, you can check it out right here in GitHub if you head over to commits and then see this commit that we have added right now. But later on, it's going to be easier to track it lesson by lesson. Still, whenever I remember, even in the video, I'll try to remind you to also push to GitHub so that your code is nice and clean within your repo. But with that in mind, now that we have set up the routing of our application, we might as well go and create a navigation bar, because here we're going to have links that point us to different pages that we have just now created the routes for. For example, clicking on home will point us to the home page, learning companions will point to that page, journey will point us to the profile, and logout will bring us back to the sign-in page. So in the next lesson, let's develop our navbar. To start developing our navbar, I'll head over into the components folder. I'll leave the UI for the components that ShadCN brings us, but for our components, we'll create them right here directly within the components folder. So I'll create a new file called navbar.tsx, and I'll run rafce so we can quickly spin it up. Within this navbar, we can wrap it with an HTML5 semantic nav tag instead of a regular div, and we can give it a class name equal to navbar. Now you can see how my IDE automatically recognizes that this navbar is coming from globals.css. And as I mentioned at the start, we're using custom tailoring classes for readability and reusability. If you're unsure at what some of these classes do, you can simply command click it, and it should lead you to the line where we have created all of the classes for that specific class name, such as the navbar, which will simply apply a flex container. It'll center the items, both vertically and horizontally, set up some margin, give it a full width, give it some padding, a white background, and also set up the padding for smaller devices. Now within it, I'll create a new link component coming from next link with an href pointing to /, which is the homepage. And within this link, we can render a div that'll have a class name equal to flex, items-center, gap of 2.5, and cursor-pointer. Within it, I'll render an image coming from next image with a source of images, logo.svg, an alt tag of logo, a width of about 46, and we can also do a height of about 44. And we can close it right here. Now, whenever a component is going into the second line, what I can do is just split it a bit so it's easier to see where it starts and where it ends. And right below this link, I'll also create a div that'll have a class name equal to flex items dash center and a gap of 8 in between the elements. And here we can create some paragraphs pointing to different parts of our application, such as home, or maybe companions, or maybe my journey, which is technically our profile, or maybe pointing us back to sign in. For now, of course, these are dummy links, but later on we can actually make them work. So now we have to import this navbar right within our homepage. But if you think about it, the navbar will not only go within the homepage, it'll also go right here within Discover, within the new companion builder, within my journey, and it'll go everywhere. And that is the perfect place to use a Next.js layout. It is a special file that allows you to embed a specific component within all of the other routes. So head over to app, layout.tsx, and here we are rendering the children. The children is simply what every single page shows for that page. So if the page is profile, it'll show the page that renders the profile page. If the page is sign in, it'll show the sign in. But in this case, we want to add a self-closing navbar on top of every single page. So the perfect place to add it within is the layout. So now if you head back, you'll be able to see this simple navbar. Now it's not yet functional. So what we need to do next is create each individual nav item. I'll do that by heading over to components, and right next to the navbar, I'll create a new component, which I'll call nav items.tsx. I'll run rafce, and I'll import it right here instead of these fake paragraphs that we created so far by saying nav items. I will leave the sign in though, because later on we'll modify it, but for now we should be good. So if I head over into the nav items, we can now make it functional by creating a new nav with a class name equal to flex items-center and a gap of 4. And right within it, we need to create a new array of different elements that we want to map over, such as an object that has a label pointing to the homepage, and it also has an href of the link where we want to go. And we need to create a new one for every link that we have so we can map over them. But instead of creating this data point right here that clutters our view, instead we want to copy this array and take it somewhere above. For example, here by saying const nav items is equal to an array where we can now define all of these different data points in piece so we can later on very easily map over them. So one is going to be the label of home. Then we're going to have one that's going to say label of companions with an href pointing to companions. And we can have a third one, which is going to say my journey. So that's going to be the label, my journey. And then href will also point to my journey. Perfect. Now we can simply map over those nav items by saying nav items.map. And from each one, we can automatically destructure the label and the href. And then for each one, we can automatically return something. Now, when I say automatically return, what do I mean by that? I mean that after the arrow, we're not putting the curly braces like we are here, because then we're opening a new functional block where we can type some stuff, do some logic, and finally then return. No, instead, we're putting a parenthesis right here directly, which means that we have an immediate return. So whatever you put in here, such as a link, it'll automatically return it. This link will have an href of href. It'll have a key, since we're mapping over the elements of label, because each label is different, and it'll simply render the label within this link. So if you do that, you should be able to see those 3 clickable links at the top, and now all of them are going to actually take you to different pages: profile, companions, home. But now, how do we know which one is currently active, besides by taking a look at the contents of the screen? We want to be able to see at a glance on which page we're on. Well, to be able to do that, we have to figure out on which page we're currently on, right? And we can do that using the Next.js's use path name hook. So I'll say const path name is equal to, use path name. This is being imported from Next Navigation. And as soon as you use a hook within your application, you have to turn it into a use client component because it'll be rendered on the client side as it's using client-side functionalities such as tapping into the current URL path that we're on. Now, based on this path, we can now add a class name to this link. And we want to make it dynamic, so we'll use something known as a CN, short for class names, coming from libutils, which allows us to check whether the current path name is triple equal to the href that we want to go to. I'll actually put this into multiple lines so it's easier to see. So if the path name is equal to href, in that case, we want to render the text primary and font dash semi-bold so we can automatically show to people that we're on that page right now. If you save that, you'll see that home will be bolded. Same if you click at companions, that'll be bold, and so on. Perfect. So you should now be able to navigate between different pages and see the current page highlighted on the navbar. And of course, this navbar is completely mobile responsive, so it looks good on desktop too. So with that in mind, we have just developed our navbar, and it's a good practice that whenever you implement a feature, no matter how small it is, that you actually push it over to GitHub. So I'll head over into my second terminal and I'll run git add dot git commit -m. You always write commit messages in an imperative form. So you say something like implement instead of implemented. Why is it that way? Well, that's because you're telling to people that are seeing these commits of what they will do if they implement this commit within their existing codebase. So this commit will implement navbar, okay? That's how you do it. And of course, oftentimes we write it in all lowercase letters, but if you want to make it look a bit nicer, you can say implement navigation bar. And once you commit it, you can just run git push, and this will automatically be reflected on your GitHub repo. Perfect. So if you have a Pro subscription and you're watching this video right within JSM Pro, you'll be able to see the commit changes for that lesson specifically, so that you always know what you had to do within that lesson. With that in mind, this homepage is looking pretty bland. So I think it's about time that we give it some love. Let's focus on the homepage next. To start developing our homepage, we first have to see how it looks like on the finished design. We have this nice looking dashboard, and the thing that we instantly see right here are these 3 differently colored cards. And what instantly stands out are these 3 differently colored action cards. So let's create those first and position them on the page. I'll create a new component for each one of these, and I'll call it companion card.tsx. Let's start by running rafce right within it, and we can head over into our homepage by heading over into app page.tsx, and we can have an h1 right here that says popular companions, and then we can create a new section that'll have a class name equal to home section, and within it we'll create a new companion card 1, 2, 3, and I'll turn this main div into a main tag because this is our main content of the page. So now we can see 3 different companion cards. Now on top of these companion cards, we also have a second part of the home section, which are these recently completed section. So this is a companions list, as well as this call to action to build a new companion. So let's add those two. I'll do it right here within the components folder by creating a new file called companions list.tsx. I'll run rafce, and we want to do the same thing for the CTA call to action. So I'll call it cta.tsx, and I'll run rafce. And now we can just import it over here within the homepage in a section below the section with the 3 cards. So I'll create another section that'll have a class name equal to home section. And here we can render the companions list, and right below it, we want to render the CTA, the call to action. So now everything looks all jumbled up right here, but very soon as we start implementing the styles for these inner components, it'll all start making sense. If you expand it to desktop view though, you'll see that the main view already started to resemble the Figma design. We have 3 companion cards at the top, the companion list at the left, and the call to action at the right. So let's figure out which different props do we need to pass to each one of these companion cards. How can we know that? Well, we can take a look at different data points that it has. For example, we can see that it has some kind of a topic like science or a subject maybe. Then it has a name or the title. It has the topic. It has the duration. And finally, the color of the card. So these are different props that are different from card to card, whereas their layout is the same. So we can technically already know what we need to pass. So for the first one, let's give it some kind of an ID. I'll make it a string in this case, 1, 2, 3. Let's give it a name, and we can basically copy what we have here on the design. So this is going to be Nura, the brainy explorer. Next, we can have the topic, which will be equal to, in this case, we can copy what it says right here, neural network of the brain. And we can have a subject. In this case, it is science. And also a duration. In this case, we can make it about 45 minutes. Same what it says on the design. That can be a number. And we can pass a color. You can do anything really. I'll just pass a random hexadecimal code. Perfect. And now that we have this card, we can basically duplicate it 2 more times. 1, 2. And we can change the ID. In this case, I'll do something like 4, 5, 6. And you can copy the contents of the next card from the design. I'll call it Count C the Number Wizard. The topic can be something like derivatives and integrals. Let's say you want to learn about that, or you don't know how to teach your kids that and you want the AI to teach them. I think we're going to reach those times pretty soon in the future. We can pass the duration and maybe another hexadecimal color like E5D0FF. And for the last card, we can pass 789 as the ID. And we can copy the rest of the stuff from the design. Verba, the vocabulary builder. We have the topic next, which is going to be, in this case, language learning. So I'll say language. We have the subject, which is going to be English literature. So let me copy that from here. And we have a duration of about 30 minutes, as well as some kind of a color, such as BDE7FF. So if we save it and go back, nothing will really change, right? And you know why? It's because we haven't yet modified the actual companion card itself. We have just passed the props into it. So within this companion card, we can now accept the props that we're passing, such as an ID, name, topic, subject, duration, and color. And we can define those as a type of companion card props. This is a TypeScript interface that we can create right above so that we always know exactly what this component has to accept. So you can say interface, companion card props, and you can declare that it needs an ID of a type string, a name of a type string as well, a topic of a type string, a subject of a type string, a duration of a type number, and a color of a type string. And now it's not going to complain because it knows that it's getting everything that it needs. But if you pass something different into it, such as a test of a type test, you'll immediately see that it says, hey, this isn't going to work. Property test does not exist on this companion card props type. Perfect. So now that we know which props do we need, and we know that we're actually accepting them, we can create the UI of the card. I'll wrap it in an article tag, which simply means a div that contains something together. I'll give it a class name equal to companion-card. And since we have to keep the background color dynamic, I'll pass an inline style of background color set to the color that we're passing through props. Next, if I save this, you'll now be able to see 3 differently colored divs. And now the only thing we have to do is render the contents. So I'll pass in the div with a class name equal to flex, justify between, and items-center, so we center it nicely. Next, I'll render a div that'll have a class name of subject-badge, and it'll simply render the subject. If you do it, you should be able to see 3 different subjects, I think for the second card, I forgot to change the subject over to Maths. So I'll copy it and I'll paste it right here. There we go, that's good. Next, still within the same outer div, but below the subject div, I'll render a button. This doesn't have to be a ShadCN button. We'll just give it a class name of companion bookmark. And I'll make it render an image that'll have a source of icons bookmark.svg with an alt tag of bookmark, a width of about 12.5, and a height of 15. Perfect. So now we can also bookmark this lesson. I'll head below the button and below the div, and I'll render an h2 that'll render the name of this tutor with a class name of text-2xl font-bold, just so we can make it stand out. Below the h2, I'll render the p tag that will render a class name of text-sm, and here we can just render the topic. Below it, I'll render another div with a class name equal to flex items-center, a gap of 2, and within it, we can display an image with a source of icons /clock.svg with an alt tag of duration, a width of about 13.5, and a height of 13.5 as well. So now you can see this little clock icon. And then below it, we can render a P that has a class name of text-sm that'll simply render duration and then min's duration, just so we know how long it lasts, 30 minutes. Or you can just say duration minutes like this. Finally, below this div, I'll render a link component with an href pointing to /companions/ID. And this is actually pointing to our route that we created, the dynamic route to that specific lesson details. I'll give it a class name of wfull. And let's not self-close it. Instead, within this link, I'll render a button that'll say launch lesson, and we can style it a bit by giving it a class name of btn primary wfull and justify center. So we center it really nicely on the screen. And with that, we got these 3 amazing looking popular companions cards. And of course, it is fully mobile responsive, but we were developing mobile first, so I could technically say that it is desktop responsive as it looks great on the full screen. In the next lesson, let's continue with the rest of the homepage UI. Now that we've implemented those 3 cards right at the top of our homepage, we can start focusing on the bottom 2, the companions list and the call to action. The recently completed section will look something like this. So it'll have to be a table of sorts, not a full-on table with lines in between the items creating an Excel sheet design, but it still has some columns and rows. So to achieve this design, we'll use a ShadCN table, a responsive table component that by default looks like this, but I'll show you how we can style it further. So let's install it by running this npx ShadCN add latest add table command, which we can run right here within our second terminal. There we go. And then head over into the companions list. Within it, we can start by copying the usage part of a ShadCN table component and paste it right at the top. Then I'll wrap the entire companions list in an article instead of a div so we can encapsulate it. And within it, let's just render an h2 that will say something like recent sessions. And then below that h2, I will then copy the second part of the usage of the table, which is the table itself, and then just paste it over here. If I do this and head back over to our deployed application, you'll notice that now at the bottom, we have what seems to be a very simple, straightforward table. But of course, we want to make it look like the one that I showed you in the design. So to achieve that, let's actually head back over into our homepage. And let's first pass the necessary props, one of which will contain the data for the table. But we can start with a simple title. So title will be equal to recently completed sessions. Next, we'll have companions. And here is where we actually have to pass the data. So I'll make it equal to recent sessions. And this is coming directly from constants index.ts. Here, you can see that I created an array of a couple of different objects that have the IDs and then subjects, names, topics, durations, and colors, so that we can nicely display some dummy data within that table, at least for now. Later on, all of this data will be coming for real from our database. So, alongside the companions, we can also pass some additional class names that will alter how the companions list will be rendered. So I'll give it a class names equal to W of 2/3. So this is the width, because 1/3 will be kept for the call to action button. And then on max large devices, we'll actually make it take the full width. So I'll do a W full. Now we can head over into the companions list and accept these props. So let's accept the title, the companions, as well as class names. And all of these will be of a type companions list props. And we can declare that as an interface right above, companions list props, where it'll have a title of a type string. It'll have companions, which will be optional, of a type companion coming from index.ts, array, and finally a class names, optional, of a type string. So what is this companion array? Well, this companion is a type that I already created within our index.d.ts, which is where we have most of our TypeScript interfaces. And here we say just that each companion will have a name, subject, topic, duration, and whether it had been bookmarked or not. So now that we're accepting those props, let's actually pass the class names into this article by saying class name is equal to, I'll make it dynamic by rendering CN class names, and we'll always render the companion list. But then on top of it, we'll also pass the additional class names. This will turn that ugly, boring table into a bit more interesting table. Still not good enough. So I'll style this H2 by giving it a class name of font-bold text-3XL. There we go. That's making it stand out a bit more. And now we can focus on the table. We first have the table. No need for a table caption. The table header will contain a table row, and table row will contain the table head. In this case, the first one will have a class name equal to text-lg, and then width 2/3. And it'll simply say lessons. The next one will have a class name equal to text-lg, and this one will render a heading of subject. And then another one will have a class name equal to text-lg, text-right, and this one will render the text that'll say duration. That's it. We only need 3. And then below it, within the table body, we can map over the data that we're passing into this table as a prop. So I will simply map over companions, (map), where we get each individual companion. And for each companion, we can automatically return a table row. And within each table row, we'll return a table cell. And within a table cell, we'll render a link component with an href pointing to /companions /companion.id. And within it, for now, I'll just render a companion.subject, just so we can visualize it. So now if you take a look, we have split the table into 3 different columns: lessons, subject, and duration. We can remove the second table row that was from the default ShadCN component usage, but now we have something that looks a bit closer to what we have on the design, still not quite there yet. So first, to get rid of this error, each table row will have to have a key equal to companion.id, and I'm noticing that we started repeating ourselves just a tiny bit, so we can automatically destructure the props from a companion, such as an ID, a subject, maybe also a name, and a topic. Is there something else? Well, I think there's a duration, but that should be more or less it. So now we don't have to repeat ourselves, and we can just say ID, subject, and so on. We're good. And within this link, we'll actually create a div. This div will have a class name equal to flex, items-center, and a gap of 2 in between the elements. And then within it, I'll render another div that will then render an image right within it. Image with a source of /icons / dynamic code of subject.svg. So I prepared a couple of images or icons for each one of the subjects. We can also give it an alt tag of subject and a width of about 35 and a height of 35 as well. And we can close it there, and maybe just so it makes a bit more sense, I'll split it into multiple lines. There we go. So now we can see different icons for each one of these subjects. We can give this div a class name equal to size of 72 pixels, flex, items-center, justify-center, rounded-lg, on max medium devices, hidden, because we don't have any space to show it on this type of view. We can also apply a style, because it allows us to be a bit more dynamic, where we can set the background color to be equal to get subject color, to which we can pass the subject. And this get subject color is coming from utils, which we imported before. It is possible that the utils got overridden when we installed ShatCN. So if that happened, you'll just have to bring back the utils that we got from the assets file within the video kit. Once you do that, now we are assigning a new color to each one of these divs, although they are hidden on mobile devices because there's not a lot of space to show them, but we will show it later on desktop devices. For now, let's head below this div and let's create another div with a class name equal to flex, flex-call, a gap of 2, and then within it, we can display a p tag that'll have a class name equal to font-bold and text-2xl that will render a companion name, or in this case, just the name. So if we do this, you should be able to see different companion names. And if you click on one of these, it'll actually point us to the companion session, which is the details page for that specific companion. Below it, I'll also render another p tag with a class name equal to text-lg, so a bit smaller than 2xl, and here we'll render the topic. Perfect. So now we can see all the different lessons. That's it that we want to show in the lessons table, but now we want to head over to the subject table. So I'll go a bit below and we will exit the first table cell, but we'll start a new one right here. This second table cell will have a div that'll render the subject of a specific session, science, maths, language, coding, and so on. And we can give this div a class name equal to subject-badge, w-fit, maxmd, hidden, because we don't have any space for it. Then I'll create another one that we will have the space for on mobile. So I'll create a div with a class name equal to flex, items-center, justify-center, rounded-lg, w-fit, padding of 2, and on medium devices, it'll be hidden. And we'll also give it a style equal to background color will be set to get subject color, to which we can pass the subject. Within that div, we can render an image, and this image will render a source of /icons / subject.svg with an alt tag equal to subject, a width of 18, and a height of 18 as well. and we can close that image right here. That should look something like this once we indent it properly. And now you can see that on mobile devices, we see something that looks like this, but this .svg was supposed to be outside of the subject. And now we can see those small icons. Now we can head into the last table cell. So I'll create it right here. This one will be for the duration. So I will create a new div right within it with a class name equal to flex, items-center, gap of 2, w full, and justify end. And within it, we can render a p tag that will render the duration. There we go. Now we can see the number of minutes, but let's style it a bit by giving it a class name equal to text-2xl. Then after duration, we can give it a bit of spacing and then display a span that will be hidden on max MD devices, and it'll simply say mins. So on mobile, we don't have the space to say mins, but on larger devices, we will have the space. We can also render an image right below this p tag that'll have a source of icons, clock.svg, with an alt tag of minutes, a width of 14, a height of 14, and a class of medium devices hidden. Once again, to save some time on mobile, because on mobile we'll show the clock, usually we'll say mins. So with that in mind, now we have created this table, which looks something like this. Looks great on mobile, and you can see that it even functions well on mobile because we can still see all of the contents. But where this table really shines is, of course, the desktop view, where we can see these more detailed icons. Then, since we're showing the icons here in a bit of a larger format, here we show just the regular text, and then we specify the duration. Pretty cool, right? And finally, we have to render this call to action part. That will look something like this. We have to create a card, within it, a little banner, a heading, a subheading, and then an image showing all the different subjects, and then a button that allows us to build a new companion. So to implement it, we can close what we have right now and just head over into this call to action component. To start implementing it, I will turn it into a section with a class name of CTA section, which will give it this nice looking background. Then I'll create a div right within it with a class name equal to CTA badge, and I'll make it say start learning your way. There we go, already much better. Next, an h2 right within it with a class name of text-3xl to make it stand out, and font-bold, and we can make it say build and personalize your learning companion. If you save it, that really sticks out. I think if we remove your, it'll fit even more nicely. And then below that h2, we can render a paragraph for which the text we can copy from the design. Something like pick a name, subject, voice, and personality, and start recording through voice conversations that feel natural and fun. There we go. That's looking great. But of course, we need the actual image and a button. So let's render an image with a source of images cta.svg, an alt tag of CTA, a width of about 362, and a height of about 232. I found those values to work the best. There we go. And below it, a new button with a class name equal to btn primary that'll then render a new image with a source of icons plus.svg, an alt tag of plus, a width of only 12, and a height of 12 as well. And below it, we can render a link component with an href pointing to companions new. This will lead us to a form that will allow us to create a new companion. So the text within it can simply say, build a new companion. And we can save it. There we go. This is actually looking amazing. It looks great on mobile, but I think you can imagine it. It looks even better on desktop. And everything is already technically functional. I mean, you can click on each one of these lines and it'll lead you to the companion details. You can click on Launch Lesson, which also leads to the companion details, or you can click on Build a New Companion, which leads you to the new companion form. Pretty cool. It almost feels like we have already developed our app, as everything looks almost exactly like it does on the design. But we still have a long way to go. For now, we have developed the UI of the homepage. But now, let's develop the UI of the Create a Companion form, or in other words, a companion builder. In order to be able to show real companions on the homepage and the companions library, we need to store them in some database. But before that, we need a form that allows us to submit those companions. And forms can be tricky at first. But thankfully, ShadCN paired with React Hook Form will do the heavy lifting for us. So head over to React Hook Form within ShadCN UI and let's install our form. Right within our code, I will head over to the terminal and run npx shadcn add latest add form, and I'll use the legacy peer deps as usual, and then we can create a new component called companion form.tsx. I'll then run rafce, and we'll need to import this form right within our page where we want to create new companions. That's within app companions new page.tsx. So within here, let's turn this into a main, since that's the main part of the component or the page. Let's render an article between it. And let's render an h1 that'll say companion builder. And right below it, we can render a companion form. There we go. Now we can explore this in action by clicking build a new companion right here. And you can see companion builder and then a companion form right below it. We can style the layout a bit more by giving this main tag a class name equal to min_lg w of 1/3. On min medium devices, the form will take 2/3 of the view, and it'll always be centered both vertically and horizontally. There we go. This article will have a class name equal to w-full, a gap of 4, flex, and flex-call. And now we can head over into the companion form. Here, I'll start by copying the usage from React Hook Forms. Or rather, let's do it step by step. I'll first copy the step 1, which is to create a form schema. I'll zoom it out so we can see a bit better. So first, we have to define the schema of our form using a Zod schema. You can read more about it in Zod documentation, but don't worry, as I'll explain everything as we go. First things first, we have to turn this into a client-rendered component or page because we are dealing with browser functionalities such as keyboard events and form submissions. We then import Z from Zod, which will allow us to validate the inputs within our form. Next, we have to define the form itself. So we have to import 2 more things, which is going to be the Zod resolver as well as the use form. And then within our form, we have to do 2 things. First, we have to define our form, and then we have to submit it. So copy this part and add it at the top of your companion form component. You'll notice that this form requires some kind of a form schema, which for now only accepts a username. So we need to modify it to suit what our form needs. For example, it'll need a name, which can be a z.string.min 1 character. We don't need the max, but I will add a message in case this rule is not met. For example, companion is required. And we can duplicate this a couple of times. For the second one, I'll say subject, and subject is required. We'll also need a topic, and topic will be required as well. After that, we'll need a voice that we're going to use for the lesson, so it has to be required. We'll also use a style of the conversation, so I'll say style is required as well. And finally, a duration. Now, duration has to be a number, so I'll say z.coerce.number with a minimum value of 1, and then we can say duration is required. So now that we have this form schema, you can see that we're actually using it to define our form. And therefore, we have to also choose the default values of that form to match the form schema. To do it quickly, I will hold the Option key and select all of these different keywords, and I'll paste them right here. Then I'll do some more keyboard shortcut magic by holding the Option key to create multiple cursors. And then I'll set all of them to an empty string, besides the duration, which I will set to be equal to about 15 minutes by default. Now that we have our form, we also need to define a submit handler, or what will happen once we submit the form. I prefer arrow functions, so let's actually turn this into a const on submit as an arrow function. And for now, we can simply console log the values once we submit the form. We can then move over to the step 3, which is to build our form. And we can build it by copying all of the different components that will make up the form. So I'll paste them right here at the top. Now we have already installed the form as a ShadCN component, but we haven't yet installed the input. So head over to the terminal and run npx shadcn add latest, add input, and we can also add a text area. Once you add those, we can head below, and I'll copy this part where we actually render the form instead of this empty div right here. You'll notice that it'll complain a bit, saying that the name is equal to username, but in this case, name can be just name because that's what we have under our default values. So with that in mind, it looks like our form is done. You now have a fully accessible form that is type safe with client-side validation. So if I click submit, you can see that it actually gives us an error. And if I go back to our application, if I click submit, we have the same thing. But now we have to render the actual inputs that our specific form needs. The first form field is already almost as good as it is, but I'll change the label to something like companion name, and I'll give it a placeholder of enter the companion name with a class name equal to input. I'll put it in a few lines just so it's a bit easier to see. And in this case, we don't need the form description, but I will leave the form message so we can display it if something goes wrong. Now we can duplicate this form field just below, and I'll actually do it a couple of times for each one of these different fields. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times more. Let's do it once, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and 5. There we go. So now we have a lot of different fields. So let's head over to our second one, and I'll rename it to subject. The form label will be subject as well. And in this case, instead of simply rendering an input, we want to render a select component. So in this case, I will open up our terminal and run npx shadcn add latest, add select. We'll use legacy peer deps. And now we can render a select right within it. So let's copy it right here and paste it within the form control. And with that, it is already looking good and it seems to be functional, but we're going to modify it for our needs. We have to control the value that has been selected. So within the select, I'll say on value change is equal to field.onChange. Value will be equal to field.value, and the default value will be set to field.value. React hook form makes it super easy because we're controlling everything using this field prop under the form field render. Next, we can give this select trigger a class name of input and capitalize. And we can give a select value a placeholder of select the subject. There we go. And now under select content, I will remove the 3 dummy select items, and instead I will map over the subjects coming from constants. And for each one of these subjects, we want to automatically return a select item. Each select item will have a value, and that value will be equal to subject. It'll have a key since we're mapping over it, also equal to subject, and a class name of capitalize. And within the select item, we will render the subject name. So if you have done this properly, you should be able to see all of the different subjects that we're offering within our application. Later on, I'll show you how we can modify these, but for now, this is more than enough. And that's it. we have our second input. I'll just reload the page so we don't have to stare at these errors. We have the companion name and the subject. Now let's head over for our third one, which is going to be the topic. So under the form label, we can say, what should the companion help with? And then for the placeholder, we can give it an example like EX, derivatives, and integrals, for example, if we're dealing with some heavy math problems. And that's it. But instead of it being an input, we can make it a text area. So text area, which will give the user a bit more space to explain what they want. Next, we can head below and we're going to have another select. So actually I want to delete this form field that I entered before, and I want to duplicate the select one that we have already created. So I'll copy the select field and paste it right here as the fourth field, but we'll want to modify it just a tiny bit. This one I'll call voice, and the label will say voice as well. We're going to keep everything the same, but within the select trigger, we'll give it just an input and a placeholder of select the voice. That'll look something like this. And then for the select contents, we're going to display two different select items. One that'll have a value equal to male, and it'll render a text of male. And the other one, which I think you can guess, will render a value of female, and also the text of female right here. That'll allow us to choose the type of the voice that we want our learning companion to have. Now I will duplicate it one more time below it, and this time I'll ask for the style of the voice. So we can change this to style, the form label to style as well. We'll keep this the same. The trigger will say select the style, and then for the select contents, instead of male and female, we'll say formal here as well, and informal, or in this case, we can say casual. So now we have two different selects, one for the male or female type, and one for the style. And finally, just below the style, we want to have one more form field. I think we currently have two, so I'll delete one. And the last one I'll rename to duration. And the label will also be set to estimated session duration in minutes. This time, it'll be an input with a placeholder of something like 15, a type of number, so that the users can more easily select the number of minutes they have with these plus and minus signs. And I think that's more or less it. We can finish it off with a button that has a type of submit. And to make it a bit more apparent, I'll give it a class name equal to wfull and cursor dash pointer. And instead of making it say submit, I'll make it say build your companion. There we go. So now we have a full companion builder form. At least the UI here. And on full screen, it should look something like this. And if you try to submit it, you'll notice that we have different errors saying that the fields are required. But if you try to successfully submit it, such as entering a real companion name, let's do something like maths in this case, and we need help with, let's say, multiplication. Choose the voice, style, and the estimated session duration, and click Build Your Companion. If you do that, and open up Inspect Element and head over to Console, you'll see that we'll get back an object with the values that we have submitted. Duration, name, style, subject, topic, and voice, all right here at our disposal to do something with them. Where are we getting those from? Well, from the function submit function right here. Later on, instead of just console logging them, we'll do something useful with them. But now, to be able to submit our actual tutor, we need one more very important component. And that is the user that is trying to create their companion. Because otherwise, how are we going to know which companion belongs to which user and how many they have created? To do that, we need to implement authentication. So far, the UI is looking great, and very soon we'll actually be able to create companions. But hey, we cannot do it if we cannot create our own user yet. So let's do that next. We are very close to storing our companions. But before that, we need to set up our authentication and then the database. So let's start with Auth. To set up Auth in this app, we'll use Clerk. It's not just a sign-in box. It allows you to authenticate and manage your users. And later on, I'll show you how we can also use Clerk Billing to implement subscriptions for your SaaS apps. But for now, just click the Clerk link down in the description and head over to your dashboard. Once you're there, at the intro, I already showed you how to create an empty project. I just called it JSM SaaS app. But if you haven't yet created it, you can just start with JSM and then give your app a name and then add Google and email for your sign-in options. After that, we have to follow a couple of steps. We can start by following their overview. It says you're just a couple of steps away from your first user. We are using Next.js. And then it says copy this quick start guide as prompt for LLM to implement Clerk in your next application. Okay, now if I head back over into my application, and if I try to head to any kind of a text editor, like a README here, and I try to paste what I just copied, it looks like this is a complete implementation of everything needed to install Clerk. And if you're using an LLM within your code editor, it should be able to do all of that for you. So this is the perfect opportunity to test out Junie. Junie is JetBrains' smart coding agent that integrates into WebStorm, and it's more than just an LLM. It's actually a coding agent that can make your coding more efficient. So you can just download it for free, and once you do, you can press Command-Shift-P and search for Junie. This will open it up right here on the right side, and there's also something called a Brave mode, which allows Junie to execute terminal commands without confirmation, which I think is going to be perfect in this case because we need Junie to install a couple of Clerk packages. So I'll just paste what I copied over from Clerk, and let's see how far Junie can run with it. First, it's going to take some time to fully understand what it needs to do. So it's going to send the LLM request, and then it'll go back and research our entire code base so it knows exactly what it has to do and where. But if you're not using Junie, don't worry about it. After Junie integrates Clerk in just a single command, I'll actually go through the entire code base and through the entire Clerk setup manually. So if you're not using an LLM, you can still do it with my guidance. So no worries about that at all, but it's just so amazing to be able to see what these modern coding agents are capable of. And I also gotta say that this is the first time that I'm seeing a dev tool mention a copy prompt button for an LLM to integrate this within your code instead of doing all of these things manually. Pretty cool. So now you can see that it's actually opening up different files and then editing those files to accommodate for changes. So let's wait a couple of seconds until it finishes, and then I'll be right back. Oh, and if you don't know how to find this Junie page, I'll leave it linked down in the description. It is completely free to get started with. And there we go. Clerk was integrated into Next.js App Router, including a middleware file with Clerk middleware and wrapping the app with Clerk Provider. The Navbar component was updated with Clerk Authentication UI components, and a template for environment variables was created. The implementation followed all guidelines without errors. This is exactly what I want to see, and to be honest, the efficiency improvement and the time Junie saved is absolutely crazy. So I'll click Done. I'll collapse Junie, and let's check out what Junie did. First of all, I'm assuming that it added Clerk Next.js to the dependencies. So since it did that, we just have to run npm install to install it. So I'll do it right here and say npm install add Clerk Next.js. And if you haven't used Junie, you can also just follow along with me right now. So first things first, install add Clerk Next.js package. This will also update it with the right version. Now, if I open up my browser, you can see that the application is still fully functional, so nothing broke, which is absolutely amazing. At the bottom right, we can see that Clerk is in keyless mode, which means that we need to add our API keys, which makes sense. Junie didn't want to mess up with our API codes. That's okay. But then it also added the sign in and the sign up components at the top right. So if you click it, it'll actually lead us to the account creation page, which is already completely functional. I gotta say, this whole experience seemed surreal. The fact that a dev tool offer a quick start guide as a prompt for an LLM, and then even more so that Junie was able to implement what the command requested, it's out of this world. I know I'm repeating myself a bit, but I am pretty much amazed at how far web development has come. And no, this doesn't mean that AI will replace you. It just means that if you use it well, it's gonna make you more efficient. Okay, so now that we have installed the Clerk package, we have to get our envs. That's one thing that the AI bots didn't want to do for us. So it provided the example, but now we're going to add our own .env.local file, and I'll paste the real keys right here. So after that, we're no longer going to be in the keyless mode. After that, you have to create a new file called middleware.ts that is not within the app, but rather at the root of our application. And within it, you have to copy this step from the documentation. Import Clerk middleware from Next.js server, export default Clerk middleware, and then we provide a configuration. Next, we have to head over into our layout.tsx, and we have to wrap our application with the Clerk provider. So just import it from @clerk/Next.js, and then just wrap your application with the Clerk provider. One extra thing we can do here is also give it an appearance, and we can define a variable of color primary, and you can set it to our primary color, which is FE5933. So now we're defining that variable as well. Perfect. Next, we want to head over into our navbar, and here we want to import a couple of things from Clerk. We want to import a sign in button, a signed in functionality, signed out functionality, and the user button. In this case, I don't think we'll need the sign up button, so we can remove that. And we can just remove it from here as well. Or rather, if you haven't used an LLM to generate this, you can replicate what I have right here. Below the nav items, we created two different divs. The signed out div, which renders the code that only needs to be showing if we are signed out, and then the code that should be showing if we're signed in. So if we are signed out, we actually want to show a sign in button. So I'll just render that sign in button like so. And I'll actually render something within it, which is going to be an actual button with a class name equal to btn sign in, and it'll say sign in. So now if we go back, you can see that it is a bit more pronounced. After that, we have if we're signed in, then we just want to render the user button. You'll very soon see exactly what this does. So if you head over to sign in, it's going to redirect you to a completely different page where if you click continue with Google and you sign in, I got redirected right here to our homepage where I now have the ability to see everything about the currently logged in user, and I can even manage my account. And my email got connected with my Google account. Pretty cool to have all of this done by default. But again, it is possible that you don't have this done on your end as well. So now let's implement it. I'll head over to app, sign in, and then here is our page. This is the page that we haven't utilized up to this point. But rather, what Clerk did is if you click sign in, we got redirected to a whole new URL, which is not hosted under our domain. So we have to fix that. Thankfully, to do just that, Clerk has an entire page on building our own sign-in or up page for our Next.js app with Clerk. So step 1 is to create a new optional catch-all route under app sign in and then double square bracket sign in page.tsx. So let's actually remove this current sign in. And within app, I'll create a new folder called sign in. Within that folder, I'll create a new folder with a double square bracket, sign-in, close the square brackets. And within it, I'll create a new file called page.tsx. And there we can write import sign in from @Clerk Next.js, export default sign in page. After that, for now, I'll skip the second step and we can focus on updating our environment variables. So I'll copy what it says right here and go over to my env local and I'll paste them below. We need to set the next public Clerk sign-in URL to /sign-in, and we can also set the fallback URLs. Now, if you head back to our application and you click sign in, you'll be redirected to a page that looks much more like our current application. Of course, the layout is not quite there yet, but we can fix it very easily by wrapping this sign in into a main tag, which I'll do right here, and then giving it a class name equal to flex items-center and justify-center. If you do this, it'll be nicely centered on the screen and it seems like it's our UI, but not only does it seem that way, it actually is a part of our application. So we can very easily go from homepage to the sign in. Heading back to our Clerk dashboard for a second, find your project and then head over to configure. Under email, phone, and username, you can also enable either the username or the first and last name. And then for an even better customization, you can head over to configure, scroll down to the account portal, and you can fully customize how you want your auth to look like by heading over to customization, set the appearance to light because our app is light, and then set the color to FE5933, which is our orangish color. And that's it. In just a couple of steps, we have wrapped our application with the Clerk provider, implemented the sign-in route, installed the Add Clerk Next.js package, and within our Navbar, we have implemented the signed in and signed out buttons. Let's reload and give it a shot one more time. And there we go. We're logged in. It couldn't be any easier. With authentication implemented so easily within our application, we are now ready to focus on another crucial feature for every SaaS application, and that is billing. Once you've implemented the features within your application, you want to allow your users to pay you some money for them. So back within our Clerk dashboard, you should be able to see a congratulations message saying that you now have one user within your application. But we already know that. So we want to do something else instead. And that is head over to the subscriptions tab and click Get Started. First things first, we have to create our first billing plan. So click Create a Plan, and you can see that we automatically got a new free plan that was created for us. We can modify it a bit by saying something like Basic Plan. Slug can be basic. And for the description, we can say something like Perfect for testing the waters, just to see whether they like our app or not. Monthly fee will be set to 0, and it can be publicly available. So just click Save. Now that we've created this plan, we are ready to add a couple of features. Features let you define and gate functionality in your app. Add features to your plans to give users fine-grained access to your app. Think of it as allowing your users to access specific app functionalities. I'll click Add a Feature to add the first one. Now, this can be totally unique. It's up to you to choose which SaaS features you want to give to your audience for this specific plan. For example, I'll say that they can have 10 conversations per month on a free plan. And I'll click Create Feature. For example, I'll say that our users on the free plan can have 10 conversations per month. This is referring to the conversations with AI tutors. And just click Create Feature. There we go, one added, 2 more to go. I actually created some of these earlier, so I just called it 3 active companions and a basic session recap feature. All of these will be offered for free. You want to give your users enough features to test the waters, but also not too much so they never have the need to upgrade. So I'll click Apply Features to Plan. Now let's head back over to Other Plans and let's create a new plan right here at the bottom. I'll give it a name of Core Learner, a slug of Core, and a description of More Companions, More Growth. And you can also set the monthly base fee to around $29, or you can literally make it whatever you want. And it's always a good idea to turn on the annual discount because that way you can get people to subscribe for 12 months and give them a cheaper price. Perfect. Now let's also click Add a Feature so we can assign specific features to this specific plan. I'll add a new feature of everything in free and click Create. I'll also add another one called Unlimited Conversations. Let's also maybe increase the number of active companions from 3 to 10. So I'll say 10 active companions. Let's also add the ability to save conversation history. You know what? We can also do inline quizzes and the recaps. We're really adding a lot of cool features here. And finally, maybe we give them access to something like monthly progress reports. Perfect. So now we have created a lot of features and we can structure them somehow in a way that makes sense. So say everything in free at the top. Next, I'll put the unlimited conversations right here, up to 10 active companions, inline quizzes and recaps, monthly progress reports, and save conversation history can also be a bit higher. Perfect. And I'll click save. So now we have this plan and many different features attached to it. Let's go ahead and add the third plan. Typically, you want to give your users some options. So I'll call this plan Pro Companion with a slug of Pro and a description of something like your personal AI-powered academy. We can increase the price to something like $49 per month with an annual discount bringing it down to maybe $39. And I'll save it. And we can now add some more features. So this time I will say everything in core. That was the previous plan that we had. Next, we can say unlimited companions. We can do something crazy like full performance dashboard. Let's also add a couple more features. I actually listed them already right here under available features. It's going to be daily learning reminders, early access to new features, and priority support. You can go ahead and add those right here under new feature and click apply features to plan. Perfect. I'll bring the everything in core at the top, also the unlimited companions. We can also have early access, full dashboard, and then reminders and support at the bottom. Actually, many of these features that are listed here, we also offer on jsmastery.com. So if you want to check out how I structure the plans for you, you can head over to jsmastery.com/membership and choose between Elite and Pro. Trust me, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Finally, head over to Configure, scroll down to Billing, and head over to Settings, and then click Enable Billing. Perfect. Billing is enabled. The only thing you have to do now is add the pricing table component to your app so your users can subscribe to your plans. Then we'll use additional SDKs to gate functionality in our app's codebase by using the has method and the protect component. So let me show you how that works. We just have to head over into subscription page.tsx, and we can also navigate over to it using the URL bar in our browser. So I'll say subscription. And right now you'll notice that it is completely empty. It just says subscription. But just by importing a single pricing table component coming from @clerk/Next.js, immediately we get a fully mobile responsive, beautiful pricing table. Of course, we'll style it further later on, but I think you can already get the point of how easy it was to get it implemented using all of the best practices of pricing cards with the pricing, the title, the description of the pricing, the cost, the toggle to switch between annual and monthly billing, and then all of the features offered within our plans. They look great out of the box, and very soon we'll put them to use. Once you subscribe, you'll also be able to see your subscription right here under your account, because now there's a new tab right here called Billing that allows you to check your current plan, add your payment method, check out the previous statements, or just switch the plan directly here within the dashboard. Just how cool is that, and how easy it was to implement. And check this out. If you go ahead and click the subscribe button, you might have thought, but there's so much more setup that we have to do to actually make this work. But no, it actually opens up the checkout on the right side, shows us the plan that we're about to join. And since we're in the development mode, we don't have to enter our own card details. Rather, we can just click pay with test card. Just like that, the payment was successful, and now we can click continue. And if you head over to manage account, to billing, you'll see that right now we are under the core learner plan. And under statements, you'll be able to see that one invoice was automatically generated for you. I gotta say, the simplicity of this is just out of this world. So with that in mind, we are now done with implementing the authentication and the billing, but now we can start focusing on real functionalities of our app, for which we need a database. So in the next couple of lessons, let's go ahead and set up our database. For the database, we'll use Supabase, allowing you to build in a weekend and scale to millions. It's an open source Firebase alternative, which is a Postgres database working on edge functions, and of course, allowing you to store things. And I decided to use it for this SaaS course, as many other SaaS applications such as Resend, Loops, Mobbin, Chatbase, and so many more use it for their SaaS apps. So to get started, you can just sign in or start your project. I'll continue with GitHub, and if you're a new user, it'll ask you to create your organization. So you can do that very easily. I'll call it JSM SaaS app. It's going to be personal and free. Once you do it, it'll ask you to create a new project. So under project name, you can say something like JSM Converso, and you can enter a database password. In this case, I'll just auto-generate a strong password and copy it. Make sure to do the same, and you can choose the region that is closest to you and click Create. Once you do that, you'll be redirected to your project dashboard. Now, head back over to your Clerk dashboard. Yep, that's right. And then go to Configure, scroll down to Developer section, and click on Integrations. And you'll be able to notice that there's a new Supabase integration that just came in. So turn it on and click Manage Integration. Now it'll ask you to select your instance. So select the right organization and the right project, enable the Supabase integration, and just populate your Clerk domain in Supabase. Copy this link and head over to Supabase third-party auth settings. Next, select your project, add a provider, choose Clerk, and just paste the domain you just copied. Pretty seamless, right? Immediately, it'll create the connection between the two. There we go. As it says, this integration will allow users to use Supabase with Clerk. Additional setup may be required. There's a whole docs page, but don't worry about that because I'll show you exactly how it works. Now, head over to the table editor, the second icon on the top left, and create a new table. Let's call it Companions. You can leave Enable Row Level Security enabled and scroll down to the columns and change the ID to the UUID type, Universal Unique Identifier. Next, we need to add all of the columns that we're going to use within our application. We can leave the created ad as timestamp with the default value of now, and we can add a couple more columns. The next one will be name, which is just going to be a varchar, which is just a variable length character string. Let's add a couple more, such as a subject, which will also be a varchar. We can add a topic, which will also be a varchar. We can add a style of the conversation. Is it a bit laid back or is it not? This is also a varchar. We can add the type of voice, which will also be a varchar, male or female. We can also add a duration, which will be an integer of 8. That's going to be enough. And we can also choose the author, which will be a varchar. Perfect. Now you can click Save, and this will create a new table of companions and add these 9 columns to it. Let's wait until it does that. There we go. And now we can create one more table. This one we'll call session_history, enable the row level security, and scroll down to columns. We can also keep the ID equal to UUID to make it unique. Created ad will be a timestamp of now, and then we'll also add a user_ID field, which will be a varchar pointing to the Clerk user ID, and I'll also add a companion ID, which will be of a type UUID. Make sure to put the underscore between the user ID and the companion ID here as well. Now we can add a foreign key to form a relation. So click Add Foreign Key Relation, choose a table to reference to, which will be a companions table, and choose the companion ID to relate to the ID of the companion. Action if reference row is removed, we can choose Cascade, which when chosen, if updating a record from public companions, it'll also update any records that reference it in this table. And we can do the same thing if a reference row is removed. And click Save. Oh, and don't forget to save the entire table as well. Perfect. Now head over to Authentication on the left side and click on Policies. Now, click on Create Policy for the Companions table. Under Policy Name, type All. Under Table, make it Public Companions. Policy Behavior can be permissive. Select Target Roles can be set to Anon, as in anonymous. And then here, you can provide an SQL expression for the using statement, where I will simply say true. So we want to return true for this policy. And I'll click Save. There we go. So we have successfully created a new policy. And now we want to add another policy for companions. So click Create Policy and call this policy Clerk. I'll select All right here as the policy command. And we want to trigger this for the authenticated users. And right here under the SQL expression, you want to say using select auth.jwt as JWT is not null. So we are writing pure SQL right here. You'll see later on how this will be integrated within our code. And with check, we can paste the same thing and call it a day. So using this with check, select auth.jwt as JWT is not null and click Save Policy. And now we want to repeat the process for the session history. So just create a new policy for the session history. Let's name this one All, public.sessionHistory, permissive, select, and choose the role of anonymous. And for using, you can just say true right here and save the policy. And we'll add one more under session history. The name of this one will be set to Clerk. It'll be permissive with the policy command for all clause. Target roles will be authenticated users. And here we have to provide the same SQL expression that we had before. Select auth.jwt as JWT. And you can click Save Policy. If you did this correctly, you should be able to see under the policies configuration two different tables, companions and session history, and both of them should have the all and select policies, all for clerk, apply to the authenticated role, and select all apply to the anonymous role. Here, let me just go into this one to make sure that I got it right. Ooh, policy name is not correct here. The policy name should just be all. It looks like it got autofilled when I was doing something, so make sure to select anon right here as well, like we did before. Policy name all, select anon true, and click Save. Yep, so this is how it should look like. I believe now we're good. Now, I know that this setup took some time, but it allowed us to create an account on Supabase and to actually spin up two different databases that are now running on Postgres, which we can call from within our application. So let's do just that and write the implementation for the use of this database within our code in the next lesson. To connect the Supabase database within our code, you can just go ahead and click the Connect button at the top. It'll give you some envs that you can just copy over to your application. If you click App Frameworks right here, and then choose Next.js using App Router with Supabase.js. I swear these modern dev tools make it super simple to implement them within our Next.js applications. They even provided all the different files that we need to make it work. This time without an LLM command, but maybe that's something that they can do as well. Still, let's first copy the envs and head over into our .env.local. I can now differentiate those two by saying that this is for clerk by adding a simple comment. The bottom one will be for clerk. This is the custom auth setup. And then right below it, we can add another one, which will be for Supabase. Perfect. And now we could just go ahead and copy and paste all of these files, but I want to actually teach you how we can integrate it without just copy pasting code. So back within our app, first we have to install Supabase. So head over into your terminal and run npm install @supabase/supabase-js. It'll take just a moment to get installed, and then you can head over into the lib folder, and within it, you can create a new file called supabase.ts. Within it, we can export const create Supabase client which is going to be equal to an arrow function. And here we'll do exactly what this function says. We will create a Supabase client. So let's start by just returning a create client, which is coming from Supabase.js, to which we need to pass the environment variables. The first one being process.env.next public Supabase URL. And I can add an exclamation mark at the end so that we know that it's actually there. And then the next one will be process.env next public Supabase anon key. And after you pass those, next you have to provide the options. So in this case, the options will be an async function called access token, where we can return the authentication token in one single line because of the Clerk and Supabase integration. So I'll say return, in parentheses, await auth, and this auth should be coming from Clerk. Add Clerk /Next.js/server .get token. Oh, and it looks like I'm missing an extra pair of parentheses right here at the end to actually fetch that token. And this is a method we're attaching to the function, so it also has to have a pair of parentheses. Now that we've created this file that creates the Supabase client and we're exporting it, we can now create a new folder within the lib folder and call it actions. Within actions, I'll create a new file called companion.actions.ts, within which we'll start implementing our application logic. So the first and most important function will be to create a learning companion. So I'll say export const create companion is equal to an asynchronous function that accepts the form data of a type create companion, and it'll return and create that companion. Now, what form data we're passing into it? Well, it is everything that we have within our front-end form: a name, a subject, topic, voice, style, and duration. So now the last missing piece of the puzzle is the actual user ID, which now, using the Supabase and Clerk integration, we can get super easily by saying const destructure the user ID and rename it as author is equal to await auth call coming from Clerk Next.js server. It is super easy to get access to the currently authenticated user. Oh, and we also have access to our entire database thanks to the Supabase client we created, which we can get by calling the create Supabase client. Remember, it's this one that we just created. Now that we have the user and the database, we are ready to do some magic. I'll say const destructure the data and the error from the function we're trying to make, and that is await Supabase dot, and we first need to access a specific table. So I'll say from companions. This is in relation to that table. We want to insert an object containing all of the form data with an author. So this is going to be the user ID. And then we can call a dot select on it, which will basically return all the columns separated by commas. Maybe we can put this into multiple lines so it's a bit easier to see. Dot from, dot insert, dot select. And then if there is an error or if there is no data, in that case, we can just throw a new error that'll either say error.message or failed to create a companion. If we don't have any errors, we can just return the first part of the data, so data 0, which should be the newly created companion. Looks like our WebStorm is wondering what Supabase even means. It doesn't know about it, so we'll just save it into the dictionary so that it knows that it is an actual word. Great. So now we have exposed this server action called create companion that allow us to call it from the front end. Oh, but hey, this is super important. This code can only be executed on the server because we are tapping into our database and mutating it. So to ensure that this server function only gets called on the server, we need to add a use server directive at the top, which means that every single function within this file will be executed only on the server. And now we can head over into our new companion page. So that is the companions new page.tsx. And we can try to get access to the currently logged in user. Or if we don't have one, we should never be able to visit that page in the first place. So right now, if we log out and head over to build a new companion, you can see that we can visit it. But that shouldn't be the case, because the users that are not logged in should not be able to create their companions. And now we can add this redirect and a check super easily by saying const destructure the user ID coming from await auth, coming from Clerk Next.js server. Why server and not client? Well, because this page is rendered on the server side. If we don't have a use client at the top, it is server. And we can also make it asynchronous. And then if we don't have a user ID, we can simply redirect using the next navigation to sign in. As simple as that. So if you go back and reload, you'll see that now you cannot visit the build a new companion. Rather, you'll be redirected to sign in. But now let's actually sign in, head over into build a new companion form. And before we submit it, let's actually open it up within our code. That is the companion form component. And here we have an empty submit function. It is right here. On submit, we're console logging values. But instead of just console logging them, let's actually do something with them. Let's pass them into our server action by saying const companion is equal to await create companion. And this one is, of course, coming from our server actions that we just created, to which we need to pass all of the form data, which I think in this case is called values right here. And we also have to make it into an async function because we're using await right here. Next, if we have successfully gotten back a companion, then we're going to redirect to /companions /companion.id to be able to visit that companion's details or the session. Else, we will just console log something like failed to create a companion. And we will also redirect, but this time not to that companion's details, but rather just to homepage, because something obviously went wrong. So now we're ready to test all of this out. We've done a lot of changes, so let's see how it goes. I'll try to submit the form for a Next.js companion, where the subject will be coding, and it should help me with figuring out server versus client components in Next.js and React. We can select the voice. You can go either for male or female. And the style, let's make it casual. Estimated session, I think about 5 minutes should be more than enough for this. So let's give it a shot. Build your companion. This is the moment of truth. If I click it, if we get redirected to the session details, which we do, and we got back the companion ID, that means that everything was successful. If for whatever reason you got redirected back to home, something went wrong with the setup. We've actually done a lot of changes before testing this out, so it is possible that something went wrong for you. If that is the case, please just make sure that you have created these two tables, that you have set up the authentication policies right here in Supabase, that you have connected it properly within the code, and that you have added the local envs. Once you do all of that, and if you head back over to companions, you should be able to see a new companion right here within our database. So now that we have this companion right here, it would be the shame to only look at it within a table format. What do you say that we actually fetch it within our code base and then display it on the All Companions page? So let's do that next. In the last lesson, we created our first companion. In this one, let's display it amongst other ones within the companion library. To do that, I'll head over into my companion library component. That's going to be under app companions right here. And we can get started implementing it by heading over to companions just so we can see what we're doing. But before we can actually display the companions right here, we have to fetch them from somewhere. And for that, we'll create another server action. So we want to head over into companion.action.ts, where we have so far just created a companion, but now we want to fetch all the companions. Before I do that, I want to push the code that we have so far to GitHub. I think I forgot to do it for the last couple of lessons. But now I'll do one bigger commit, which is never a good idea. Always split it into as many smaller commits as possible, if you, of course, don't forget to do that. So learn on my mistakes, always commit per feature. In this case, I'll just do git add dot, git commit -m, and let's try to remember what we implemented. If I'm not mistaken, the last commit was to implement the homepage UI. And since then, we have also developed the form. And within this one, I have also implemented the companion form. So since then, we have implemented authentication, billing, and database setup, as well as the create companion server action. And I'll just run git push. And there we go, I've just pushed this commit. Now let's focus on creating our second server action of the day, which will be the one that'll fetch all the companions that we have created so far. So right below it, I'll say export const get all companions, and it'll be equal to an asynchronous function that'll accept a couple of props. Because right off the bat, we want to make it work with pagination, search, and filtering. So I'll make it accept a limit of how many companions we want to show. By default, it'll be set to 10. We can also accept the current page number. By default, it'll be set to 1, as well as the subject and the topic. And all of these will be of a type get all companions, which will just accept those exact things. So first things first, since all server actions are run on edge, which means that there's not a consistent connection to the server, rather, we have to make a connection to the database within each one separately. So I'll say const Supabase is equal to create Supabase client. Same thing as we have done above. This time, we don't have to get the user ID because we're not doing a mutation. Rather, we're just fetching the data from the database. Now, I will create a new query by saying let query is equal to Supabase.from companions table, select all the fields like this. But if we have the subject and the topic, in that case, we want to make the query equal to query.iLike, where we can specify within which column we're searching for the likeness, and then we can specify the actual pattern that we're searching for. In this case, it'll be a template string of %, subject, and end with %. This means that we're looking for any mention of this subject within the subject. But we can also append the .or to it, where we can say or topic.iLike %, topic %, comma name iLike %, topic %, because we want to search it within the topic and the subject. But else if we only have access to the subject, in that case, we want to change the query to be equal to query.iLike. And now it'll be pretty simple because we can just copy this first part, query.iLike. We're going to search for the subject and search for the pattern of subject. And another else if we only decide to pass the topic, in that case, we can make the query equal to query.or, and then we can pass this second part only. So query.or, topic iLike, topic name iLike, topic. So we're searching for the topic within either the name or the topic. So in this part, we're building the query based on the name, topic, and subject filters. We also need to do the pagination. So I will say query is equal to query.range, in parentheses, page -1. So we get access to the elements on the first page, times the limit of elements that we're showing per page. And then we want to point it to page times limit -1. So we start from, for example, page 2, and then we do to page 3. Or in other words, we show the first 8 elements, and then we show another 8 for the second page. Finally, once we have the query, we can fetch the data from the database based off of that query by saying const data, which we can rename to as companions. We can also extract the error from it, and that'll be equal to await query. If there is an error, in that case, we can just throw a new error with the error.message. But if everything goes right, we will just return the companions that we just fetched. Perfect. Now, if we head back over to our companions library, we can fetch those companions using that server action. But first, I want to teach you a bit about how search params work within Next.js. See, Next.js makes it super simple to accept URL search params. So to use it, you have to turn this function into an async function and accept search params from props of a type search params. Now, how do you get access to the search params? Well, you can say const params is equal to await search params. So you just have to await them. But now you might be wondering, what do these params actually contain? So I will just console log them and say params will be equal to whatever we're console logging right here. If you do this and open up the terminal, because we're on the server side right now, so the console logs are not appearing in the client, rather on the server. And if I zoom in so you can see it a bit better, you'll see that the params is just an empty object. So how can we actually populate those params? Well, by modifying them right within the URL. So after the URL, you're going to say question mark, and then you can say, for example, subject is equal to math. If you do that, you'll see that now under params, there's going to be a new subject of math given to you within this object. Same thing if you go ahead and say and topic is equal to React.js. Not really math, but you get the idea, right? So now we can accept those prompts, which I'll call filters, and I'll say const subject is equal to if filters.subject exists, then make it filters.subject, else just make it an empty string. And we can duplicate it and do the same thing for the topic. And now that we have the subject and the topic, we can fetch the companions using the server action we created by saying const companions is equal to await get all companions that accepts the subject and the topic. So now if you save it and you console log the companions, you will see that if you reload, you'll get an empty array of companions. Now we're getting an empty array because we are querying it for the subject math and then React.js, but React isn't really a math topic. So I will just clear out all of the querying right now and just leave an empty fetch. And if you do that, you're going to get back an array with an object that actually contains the data for the companion we created. Perfect. So now let's display it right here by turning this into a main tag. And right here, I'll create a new section with a class name of flex, justify between, gap of 4, on max small devices, flex call, just so we can show multiple in a single column. Here, I'll render an h1 that'll say companion library, and I'll render a div with a class name equal to flex and a gap of 4 that'll say filters. Later on, we'll display real filters right here, but for now, that'll look like this. Now, we can create a new section just below it, and this section will have a class name equal to companions grid. And within it, we can map over our companions by saying companions.map, and for each companion, we can automatically return a companion card, which we have already created before, and now we can see that we have to pass some props to it, such as the ID, name, topic, subject, duration, and so on. What I'll do instead is I'll just pass a key because we're mapping over an element, so the key will be equal to companion.id, and I will spread the rest of the companion properties so we can automatically pass it right in. If you do that, you'll be able to see a Next.js companion, figuring out server versus client components in Next.js. It's a 5-minute coding lesson, and soon, very, very soon, we'll be able to launch it. But hey, where's the color for this lesson? Well, to get the color, we have to pass the color prop, but the color depends on the topic, so we have to call our getSubjectColor utility function, to which we have to pass the companion.subject, and then let there be color. Perfect. And there you have it. How simple was this? Just in the last lesson, we have fully set up the authentication and the database. Before, we have created a form that allows us to build new companions, And just like that, we built it, and now we're able to see it right here within our companion library. Creating SaaS applications has never been easier. And if after watching this course you want to build yours, well, just below this course, you'll be able to find a complete course on creating your own SaaS application. Not following along and building Converso, but rather building and monetizing your own startup. But with that in mind, let's also add filters. To create the filters, I'll create two new components. So I'll head over into the components folder, and I'll create one called search input.tsx, where I'll run RAFCE, and I'll also create another, which I'll call subject filter.tsx, where I'll also run RAFCE. Then within our page that we were just on, instead of just saying filters within this div, we can actually render the search input as well as the subject filter, which for now we'll just say search input and subject filter. So to get started with implementing them, you just have to head over into that component and get it implemented. To implement it, let's first ask ourselves, what does our input need? And this input will need to modify the URL bar, so it'll surely need to have access to the current path name. So I'll say const path name is equal to use path name. And this is coming from Next Navigation. And as soon as you use a hook or something that starts with the word use, you immediately need to turn this into a use client component. Or whenever you want to type something into it, like an input, then it's most likely a use client component. Next, we'll need to have access to the router so we can do the navigation. And we can get access to this by getting the use router from Next Navigation. We're also going to get access to the current search params. And this is a bit different than getting the search params within a server-side component. There, you get them to props, but within client components, you can get them by saying search params.get, and then you can specify which param you want to get. For example, in this case, we want to get access to the topic that we're searching for. Oh, but it looks like I got a bit ahead of myself. First, to get the search params, you of course have to get them through a hook. Use search params like this coming from Next Navigation, and then you can extract a query that you're searching for by doing the search params.get call. And once we get it, we'll also need a use state snippet to modify it. So I'll call this search query and set search query at the start equal to an empty string. And we're using the use state coming from React. Now that we have this, we can create a new div right here and give it a class name of relative, border, and border dash black, rounded dash LG, items dash center, flex, gap of 2, padding X of 2, padding Y of 1, and H fit. And within it, we can display an image that'll have a source of /icons/search with an alt tag of search, a width of 15, a height of 15, and that's it. You should be able to see a little search icon, but that's search.svg. And then it shows up right here. But of course, what is this div and an image without an input? So let's add an input next with a placeholder equal to search companions, ... a class name equal to outline dash none, a value equal to search query, which is the state we created, and an onChange equal to a callback function where we get access to a keyboard event, and then we set search query to be equal to e.target.value of that key press that you just pressed. Immediately, we'll get a bit of an error saying that a component is changing from a controlled to an uncontrolled state, but I believe that shouldn't be the case because we are only using the state. So if we reload, that error should be gone. Okay, and now we actually have to modify the URL bar based on what we're typing right here. This is one of the most powerful concepts in Next.js because you don't have to manage everything on the client side. Rather, we'll do the entire database filtration based on what you're typing right here, directly through the URL. So to do that, I'll create a new use effect hook where I'll set up a dependency array, and we want to recall this function whenever the search query changes, whenever the router or the search params change, or whenever the path name changes. And what we want to do here is say if a search query exists, in that case, we want to form a new URL and redirect to it. Something like router.push, and we want to push over to the current route and then append to it this new topic that we have, such as topic is equal to, and then we can pass the search query. Something like this. But if it were so simple, then if I start typing it, well, you would see that automatically we would get redirected to the current route and topic. But then if I cleared up that search, it would still be there. We would not be able to get rid of it entirely. Trust me, I know, because I tried to do this many times. So for that reason, while I was developing the application for the ultimate Next.js course, I actually created my own package that simplifies the management of search params in Next.js. So it simply allows you to add or update query parameters, remove keys from existing query strings. It is fully typed and developer friendly and works great with React and Next.js. So let's go ahead and follow along. I'll leave the link to it down within the video kit. So let's first install it by running npm install @jsmastery/utils, and then we can copy its usage. Instead of just automatically pushing to this route, we will first form this new URL by using the form URL query functionality, which we have to import from JSMastery utils. To it, we're gonna then pass the search params, which contains everything, in this case the topic, and we wanna choose which key we wanna update. So I'll say we wanna update the topic field with the search query, which is the value we just typed into that input. Then we wanna call the router.push, and we wanna set scroll to false. Okay, so let me show you how this works. If I go back, I'll expand this just a bit so you can see the URL bar. And if I type test right here, you'll notice that automatically the topic will get changed to test. If I add a keystroke or remove it, you can see that it is automatically reflecting what is shown here. So if I search for something that doesn't exist, it goes away. And if I search for next, it is right here because it's filtering it. Keep in mind that the search input itself is not doing any filtering. Rather, it is just changing the URL bar, and then within the companions library, we're using those search params that the input is updating to be able to pass this new topic or the subject into the get all companions, which then filters it for us and returns the right companions. But we're not done yet. Here's the issue that I was talking to you about. If I remove everything from the search input, since we're no longer in this if statement, you can notice that this search query will still remain right here. So we have to add an else and say if path name is equal to /companions, we want to remove the keys from the URL query by doing this. New URL is equal to remove keys from URL query, which we have to import from this utility package, to which we pass the new search params and choose which key we want to remove. In this case, it is the topic, and then we just push over to that URL. So if I go back and if I type test, you can see that we get redirected to it. But if I delete it, it gets completely cleaned up from the URL. And this already is amazing. But one issue is that every single keystroke that we make actually creates another call to our database and to our API, which we don't want to do. It is putting too much pressure on our database to give us back the data for every keystroke, but maybe we just wanted to type Next.js and get one single response back and not 6 for every single keystroke. So to fix this, we have to add a delay or a debounce to this use effect. And we can do that by saying const delay debounce fn, as in function, will be equal to set timeout, where we provide a callback function. And then we bring this entire if statement into this callback function. And then as the second parameter of that function, which is right here at the end, we can provide to it the number of milliseconds of the delay. For example, we can do 500 milliseconds. So now, for every single letter that you type, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it's not actually going to send the request until you wait for more than 500 milliseconds. So if you're typing fast enough, you can type the entire word Next.js, and it's only going to make one single request to the database. Let me show you. A, B, C. It made 3 separate requests, but if I now type Next.js, it actually made only one. Pretty cool, right? The more you know. And as I said, I dove super deep into how the search params work within modern Next.js applications. So deep, in fact, that I decided to create this very simple package which simplifies the usage of adding and removing keys from the URL query. And I actually created it as an NPM package, which was created as part of the Ultimate Next.js course. So if you like this course and you want to dive much deeper into what Next.js has to offer so you can build your applications in the best way possible, well, go ahead and check out the Ultimate Next.js course. Trust me, you won't be disappointed, as it is our best and most detailed course right now. And I would dare to say that it is the best Next.js course on the internet. And as of recently, we turned on the 7-day free trial. So if you want to try it out completely for free, just dive into it. You can do that right now. Do it and let me know what you think. With that in mind, now that we have this search input, we also want to add the filter for the subjects. So head over into the subject filter component. And since this one is super simple to the input, but even simpler than that, I actually want to challenge you to try to build it right now on your own. Go to the design, check out how it needs to look like. It is a single SHADCN select component, which allows people to select different subjects. So you'll most likely have to use our constants right here, where we have the list of subjects. There we go. Map over them, display a new list item or select item for every single one of these options, and then change the state and modify the URL bar to add the end subject is equal to the selected subject. Try it out and let me know how it goes. I'll provide you with a solution within the video kit, which I will now copy and paste right here in 3, 2, 1. There we go. It should look something like this. You have the subject. You can select all subjects, which just cleans it up, or you can select a specific subject. I think all of these are empty besides coding right now where our Next.js component lies. So when it comes to how we're doing the actual change of the search params, it is exactly the same as what we have done with the input. We modify the key, we push it, and we remove it if all is selected. Perfect. With that in mind, you now have a fully functional companion library, which fetches all the companions, and you have complete sorting and filtering so that if it doesn't exist, you don't show it. If something does exist, like Next.js in this case, you do show it, and you can also filter out by subject. Of course, this is not so useful at this point in time because we have only one companion, but later on, once you have more, or you want to search through other people's companions, this will be super useful, trust me. But of course, what is this card good for if it's not actually doing anything? If I click launch lesson, it just leads me to the companion session, but it is completely empty. So in the next lesson, let's focus on implementing the core of our app's functionalities, and that is actually crafting our educational companion that will speak to us, and based off of these information that we provided, such as the title, category, description, and so on, it'll actually teach us what we need to learn about. This course has been exciting up to this point, but we're just getting started. It's time to implement the core functionality of our application. Auth is here, billing is here as well, but now we gotta give something to our users. And that something is the ability to have the actual conversation with their AI teacher companion. To do that, we'll use Vapi, the voice AI agents for developers. So click the link down in the description to be able to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing, and then sign up so you can visit your dashboard. Once you're in, you can head over to Assistants, and in my case, it looks like I already have one assistant created. If you don't, you can just immediately create a new one. But let's see what Riley is all about. I mean, check this out. You can configure the behavior of the assistant to behave exactly how you want it. Everything from choosing a provider to the model that the provider uses, the first message and the system prompt, and more. You can also choose the provider for the voice. Vapi has their built-in ones, but you can also switch to 11 Labs or Azure. And one thing that I love about Vapi is that we don't have to go ahead and get our own OpenAI keys, for example, or Google Gemini keys. We also don't have to create an account on 11 Labs to be able to use their text-to-speech. Everything comes right out of the box. And you can also test it out immediately by clicking Talk to Assistant. Let's see what it does.
Thank you for calling Wellness Partners. This is Riley, your scheduling assistant. How may I help you today?
Hey, bro. How are you doing?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How can I assist you with scheduling your appointment today?
No appointments. I'm just using you to show how great you speak because you're not a real human. You're an AI after all.
That's right. I'm an AI here to help with scheduling and providing information. I'm glad you're enjoying the way I communicate. If you ever need assistance with appointments or have questions about our services, feel free to reach out.
Okay, this sounds amazing. Great. Super happy that we tested it out and had a call with the assistant. But now it's time to set it up within our application. So let me show you how simple it is. Just head over into Vapi API keys and create a new public key. You can call it JSM Converso and just click Create Public Token. As soon as you do that, you can just copy it, head back into your application, into the .env.local, and then at the bottom, you can say Vapi, and you can add a new key of next public Vapi web token, and you can paste it right here. Perfect. So now how would we go about using it within our application? Well, it is super simple. We just have to install the Vapi web SDK by running npm install @vapi-ai/web. Now that it is installed, let's head over into lib and create a new file called vapi.sdk.ts. And within it, we can just create and export a new instance of Vapi by saying export const Vapi is equal to new Vapi coming from Vapi AI web, to which we need to pass the process.env dot next public Vapi web token. And we can add an exclamation mark to let TypeScript know that we know that it's going to be there. So if you do that, now we'll be able to use this Vapi instance within our code. First, we need to get one individual companion from the database. So let's head over into lib, actions, and companion actions.ts. Currently, we're fetching many companions, but now we need to get just a single one so we can actually generate that companion. So just below get all companions, let's create another server action. Export const get companion is equal to an asynchronous function where we accept an ID of that companion. As usual, we get access to our Supabase by creating a new Supabase client for this specific call. And then we just want to make a call by saying await Supabase dot from companions, give me everything. So I'll select everything and only give me the one that equals ID equal to the ID that we're passing right here through params. Now, this will give us back the data, so I can destructure the data, as well as the error from this await Supabase call. Once we have it, if there is an error, in that case, we'll simply return the console.log of the error, else we will return data 0, which is the actual companion. Now we can head over to that companion details page, which is under app, companions, ID, page.tsx, and we can try to fetch that single companion's details. In this case, we won't be doing that through search params like before, but rather we'll be doing it through just params, which will be of a type companion, session, page, props, which we can define just above. I'll say interface of companion, session, page, props, and we accept params, which is actually a promise, which will then be resolved with an ID of a type string. Let's spell interface properly, and now you can see we're good. So once again, what is the difference between params in Next.js and search params? You know that search params have the URL and then question mark something or key is equal to the value. And then you can append one more key is equal to another value. But with params, you have the URL and then you have a / and then you have a specific ID or any kind of a random value right here. So you can extract that value on its own. You cannot extract the key and the value. It's already in there within the URL. And in this case, the params will contain the ID. Why? Because we have put it right here within square brackets. If we put something else right here, then we would have to change this from ID to that something else, which is the file name. Perfect. It'll make more sense in action. So now I can destructure the ID by calling await params. And since I'm using await, I have to add async right here. Next, now that we have the ID, we can very easily call the server action we created. Const companion is equal to await get companion, and we can pass in the ID. And we can also get the current user by saying const user is equal to await current user, and that's it. It is so simple to do that using the functions we have already created. Now let's do some checks. If there is no user, we can just redirect using the Next.js redirection to / sign in. Pretty simple, right? No user, you can't access. Else, if there is no companion, in that case, we can redirect to / companions, which is the all companions page. But if all of that is good, and now we have actually fetched the important details we have, such as the ID, the user, and the companion details itself, we can start focusing on the UI of the companion session. So let's bring back our browser, and I'll turn this into a main tag because our entire page is right here within this main. Next, I'll create an article, and this article will have a class name equal to flex, rounded dash border, justify between, padding of 6, maxmd flex call, so we can show more elements one below another. Next, within this article, I will render a div, and this div will have a class name equal to flex, items dash center, and a gap of 2 in between the elements, within which we'll have another div that'll have a class name of size of 72 pixels, flex, items dash center, justify dash center, rounded dash LG, on max medium devices hidden. You'll see very soon what we're doing right here as soon as I provided a style. So right here, I will say style is equal to background color is equal to get subject color, to which we need to provide the companion dot subject. And it looks like subject doesn't exist on companion because companion is of a type number. What? That definitely shouldn't be the case. Oh, look, I'm returning just an empty array of 0, and TypeScript automatically knew that that doesn't make sense. So actually what I should have been returning is data 0. Hopefully you notice this. But if you fix it, you'll notice that now it no longer complains. But if that is now fixed, then where's the background color? Well, let me fix this items center, and let's console log the companion to actually see what we're getting back from it. Once you do that, I'll open up my terminal, scroll all the way down and reload, and you can see that we have the subject right here, which is coding. Oh, I think I know why we can't see it. That's because on smaller devices, it is hidden. But as I expand it, you can see this little rectangle within which we're going to display the topic icon. The only thing we have to do here is just say image with a source of / icons / companion dot subject dot svg with an alt tag of companion dot subject, a width of 35 and a height of 35 as well. So this one is for the desktop devices. But now we can exit this div, and below it create another div that'll be visible on all screen sizes. I'll give it a class name of flex, flex-call, and a gap of 2. Within it, I'll create another div. Oh, it looks like I have to go to sleep, but I will collapse that because creating these courses for you is what I really love doing. So now this div will have a class name equal to flex, items-center, and a gap of 2. And I'll render a p tag that'll render the companion.name with a class name of font-bold and text-2xl. Below it, I'll render a div that'll have a class name equal to subject-badge, and on max small devices, it'll be hidden. And here we can render the companion.subject. It also won't show on mobile devices. Now let's scroll a bit down. So basically one div down, and then here create a p tag that'll have a class name of text-lg, and we'll render the companion.topic. There we go, figuring out server versus client components in Next.js and React. And now that I think about it, I'm mentioning companion a lot. So instead of saying companion.this, companion.that, what we can do is just destructure those values out of the companion. So I can extract the name, the subject, the title. What else do we have? We have a topic, a duration, and we'll see if we have something else, we can easily add it later on as well. And then, for example, I can say if there's no name, then point to companions. Now I can just remove the word companion in front of every other part that comes from the companion, and it makes a bit more sense code-wise. Perfect. Now we can go below this div that contains the p tag and below one more div, and here we'll render the duration in minutes. Let's style it a bit better by giving it a class name of items-start, text-2xl, and on max medium devices, we will hide that duration. Perfect. Now you can think of this as just the header for the actual AI conversation. I think it makes a bit more sense on desktop as it actually is a header. We can see the topic, the title, the category, the description, and the duration. But here is where the magic happens. Now we have to develop the rest of the UI, which is where the actual conversation with our educational AI voice companion will happen. So let's do that in the next lesson. Let's make our app speak and teach us things. Vapi's SDK will send an event every time when the AI is speaking, and we can use that event to add nice animations to keep our users more engaged. To do that, we're going to use Lottie files, which will provide us some animations and allow us to make our app that much more engaging. You can search for something like a sound or maybe a sound wave and download it to make it seem like our AI bot is actually speaking with this animated wave. You can choose any free animation from here that you like, but I actually provided the one that I liked most right here under constants, soundwaves.json. Oh, and there's one more thing we have to do. Since we'll use our profile picture right here to show that we are speaking with that bot, we have to authorize it within our Next.js config. So head over into nextconfig.ts, and right here, you can say images, remote patterns, and then an array where you can have one object of hostname img.clerk.com because our profile image is stored on Clerk. Now we can create a new component where we're going to display those sound waves, and I'll create it within the components folder and call it companion component.tsx. Run rafce within it, and then import it within our session details, which is companions ID. And we can put it right here below this article by just having an empty companion component. You should be able to see it right here at the bottom right. There it is. And now we can dive into it and implement it. Let's start with a bit of JSX to give you an idea of how our structure will look like. First, turn this div into a section with a class name of flex, flex-call, and an h of 70 VH. Why? Because the header will take the rest of the 30 VH. Next, within this section, I'll create another section that'll have a class name equal to flex, a gap of 8, on max small devices flex-call, and finally within it we can render a div that'll have a class name equal to companion section. Then within it you can display another div which will have a class name equal to companion-avatar, and you can also give it a style property to dynamically style it with a background color equal to getSubjectColor, to which we can pass the subject. But where is this subject coming from? Well, we'll have to pass it right into the companion component. It's being called right here within the companion session, so we have to pass all of the right props. Instead of just saying subject is equal to subject, topic is equal to topic, and so on, we can just spread the initial companion data. So I will just copy this part, still leave it as just companion right here, and then I will spread it below. Const, we take this out of the companion, but what this allows us to do is to still have the full companion object together at the top. So now we know that name, subject, title, topic, and duration are right here. So what we can just do is spread the properties of the companion, but we still have to pass some additional. And as I said, this will automatically pass the following props. But we have to pass some additional details as well, which is the companion ID, which we have stored under ID, the username, which will be equal to user.firstname, and we can add an exclamation mark to let it know that it's there. Same thing for the user image, which is under user.imageURL, and I think that is it then. Now we can head over into the companion component and accept all of those props at the top. So I will just destructure them: companion ID, subject, topic, name, username, user image, style, and voice. Perfect. And then we can set it to be of a type companion, component, props. Perfect. And now you can see that we get this color. Within this div, we can also render an image that'll show us when the call status is inactive or connecting. So I'll render a div and I'll give it a class name equal to CN for class names, which you have to import, and it'll always have the absolute style as well as a transition opacity and a duration of 1000 for the animation. But then based off of the status, we have to figure out what icon do we show. So we need to create a new use state field at the top. I'll use the use state snippet to quickly create it, and I'll call it a call status, which will be a use state of a type call status. And at the start, it'll be equal to call status dot inactive. And of course, don't forget to import state coming from React. There we go. And since we're using use state, of course, we have to turn this into a use client component. Otherwise, we're going to have an error. Now, what is this call status? Well, we can create it as an enum by saying enum call status, and then we can provide it different values, such as inactive is inactive, connecting is connecting, active is active, and finished is equal to finished. Now, what does this mean and why do we have those values right here? Well, if we didn't have call status.inactive as an enum, then you would just have a string of inactive. But what can happen with a string is that maybe you can just misspell it and not know it's an error. But if you just misspell a string, that's not really an error, right? So your code would not know to alert you that you have made a mistake, but your app wouldn't work. But instead, if you make it into an enum and then you misspell it right here, immediately it'll complain saying that inactive doesn't exist on the type call status. Did you mean to say inactive? Which is super useful to make your code more predictable. Perfect. We're back in action. So now that we have this call status, we can change it based on the data that we get over from Vapi. So I'll create a new use effect with a callback function and a dependency array. I'll leave the dependency array to be empty, so we only want to execute it at the start. And here we want to have a couple of functions. First function will be called onCallStart, which is a function that'll simply set the call status to be equal to call status.active. Then we want to have another const onCallEnd, where for now, we can just set the call status to be equal to call status dot finished. Next, we can have on message. So I'll say const on message. And this one we'll implement soon because it doesn't have to change the call status. So for now, I'll leave it empty. And I'll also do const on error, where we'll accept the error of a type error. And then we can just console.log that error right here. Perfect. Now we'll tap into Vapi's event listeners by saying vapi.on, and make sure to import this Vapi. It is coming from that instance that we created in our vapi.sdk.ts, and say .on call start. So this is an event listener, and we want to simply call the on-call start function when the call starts. Now I'll duplicate this a couple of times, and then we're going to have vapi.on call end. I think you can guess what we're doing. We're going to call the on-call end function. Next, on message, we're going to call the on message function. After that, we're going to have the error. There, we're going to hold the on error. It looks like this on message is complaining because it should be a callback function. So I'll fix it. And I actually want to add two more handlers. Const on speech start. Here, we don't want to mess with the call status because the status has already been initiated, but instead, we want to set is speaking state to true. So I'll create a new state called use state snippet, is speaking, set is speaking, at the start set to false. And then right here, on speech start, we can basically set is speaking to true, and on speech end, we can set is speaking to false. So now we can also handle those here. On speech start, call the on speech start function, and on speech end, simply call the on speech end function. Basically what this does is Vapi tells our application whenever something happened with the AI bot, and then we handle it in our application using state. And then when we update the state, well, we can then do whatever we want within the application to show that to the user. Now, whenever you're adding some event handlers within the use effect, it is very important to clean them on the cleanup. And to do that, you have to say return a callback function where we can now turn those off. Just copy the ones you have, and then simply instead of on for all of these, simply say vapi.off. That way we're keeping your app optimized. Perfect. So now our values on speech start and speech end and call start and call end should actually update our two states. So we can do something based off of those states within our application. For example, right here within this CN, the class names, I'll put it into a new line so it's easier to see. We have this default string that is always present, but then after it, we can decide if call status is triple equal to call status dot finished, or if call status is triple equal to call status dot inactive. In that case, we're going to give this an opacity of 100, else we're going to give it an opacity of 0. And if call status is triple equal to call status dot connecting, in that case, we're going to give it an opacity of 100 and animate dash pulse so that it seems like we're connecting. And within this div, we can display an image, and this image will have a source of /icons /subject.svg with an alt tag of subject, a width of 150, a height of 150, and a class name of maxsmw-fit. And there we go. Now we can see the topic of our conversation. But now below that div, let's display the Lottie animation to show when the status is active. So I'll display a div with a class name of CN, and it'll always have absolute transition dash opacity duration of 1000, but only sometimes when the call status is triple equal to call status dot active, then we want to give it an opacity of 100, else it's going to have an opacity of 0. And now within it, we can install Lottie. It's for those animations that I was telling you a bit about before. So just open up your terminal and run npm install lottie react. And here you can just call the lottie component like this, import from lottie react. And to it, you can pass the lottie ref equal to lottie ref. This is something that we have to create just above. So head over up, below the states, create a new const lottie ref is equal to use ref coming from React of a type lottie ref current props at the start equal to null because we haven't yet attached anything to that ref. Then I want to create a new use effect, and this use effect will change depending on the speaking status. So in the dependency array, I'll add is speaking, and I'll also add the lottie ref, and I'll check. If a lottie ref exists, that means that we can do something with it. And then if we're currently speaking, then we can set the lottie ref dot current question mark dot play. So we'll play that animation. But else, if we're not speaking, I'll do lottie ref dot current dot stop to stop that animation, to really make it seem like we're having a conversation. Let's actually properly open this and close it. There we go. And I'll add a question mark right here in case the current ref doesn't exist. Perfect. Now we can scroll down, and under lottie, we now have access to this lottie ref, but we also have to tell it what it'll stop and play. And that'll be the animation data equal to sound waves. And we have to import these sound waves at the top by saying import sound waves coming from @constants / sound waves .json. It looks like I misspelled it, but if you search for it under constants, you'll see sound waves.json. Oh, it looks like I'm missing a / right here. This is not a package, it's a file path. So if you do it correctly, sound waves are now coming in and we're displaying them within this lottie animation. Let's also give it an autoplay set to false and a class name of companion -lottie. And very soon, once we initiate the call with the Vapi agent, our conversational assistant, and when that changes the status to active, it'll appear right here. For now, let's head 1 and then 2 divs down, and let's render a p tag that'll render the name of this companion with a class name equal to font-bold and text-2xl. Finally, we need to show some information about us, the user speaking with the bot. So head below this div that wraps the p tag and create another div with a class name equal to user-section. Within it, a new div with a class name equal to user-avatar, and within it, an image that'll render a source of user image, an alt tag that'll render the user name, a width of about 130, a height of 130 as well, and a class name of rounded LG. If you save that and expand your screen, you can now see that we have 2 portions, one big one for the AI conversational bot and one for us. But on smaller screens, there's not really enough space to show us as well, so I think this is going to be good. But for now, I'll keep it in tablet view just so we can see what we're developing. Below the image, I'll also display a p tag with a class name equal to font-bold and text-2xl, where I'll render the username. Then we can exit this div and I'll render a button that'll have a class name equal to btn mic, as in microphone. And on click of that button, we'll want to toggle the microphone on or off. So we have to create this function right above by saying const toggle microphone. And right here within it, we first need to figure out whether we're muted right now or not, which we can do by saying is muted, vapi.isMuted. Thankfully, they provide us this function. And then vapi.setMuted to be equal to the current not is muted status. So we're basically toggling it on or off. And I also want to keep track of this within the state. So above, I'll create a new use state snippet and call it is muted set is muted. At the start, set to false. So now below it, we can set is muted to be equal to not is muted. Perfect. So now let's actually display that button right here by displaying an image within this button we created with a source of if is muted, then we'll render the /icons /mic-off.svg, else we'll render /icons /mic-on.svg with an alt tag of mic, a width of 36, a height of 36, and we can close it right there. There we go. And you can also display a p tag with a class name equal to max small devices hidden because there's no space for it. But if we do have space, and if it is muted, it'll say turn on microphone, else it'll say turn off microphone. There we go. You can see it. And we can create another button below this button that will allow us to actually connect to the call. So I'll say button with a class name equal to cn, rounded -lg, padding y of 2, cursor -pointer, transition -colors, because we want to change the color of the button depending on the state of the call, w full, and text white. Now within this button, we'll want to check the current status. So if call status is equal to call status.active, then we want to say end session. Else, if the call status is not active, we want to check the call status one more time and check if it's equal to call status.connecting. Because if it is connecting, then we can say connecting. Else, we can say start session. Because if it's not active and if it's not connecting, then the only last option is that we can start the session. Now we cannot see this button yet because the text is set to white, but to be able to see it, we can add some additional class names to the button depending on the call status. So if call status is equal to active, in that case, we want to give it a BG red of 700, else we want to give it a BG primary. There we go, using a ternary operator. There we go. And I'll also give it another class and say if call status is equal to connecting, in that case, we can give it a class name of animate-pulse. You'll see how cool this looks like very soon. And to this button, we can also give an on click where if call status is equal to active, in that case, we want to call the handle disconnect to disconnected, else we want to call the handle call, which are the two functions we need to create. So let's scroll up and let's create a function. Const handle call is equal to an asynchronous function like this. And then we're going to have another one, const handle disconnect, which is going to be another function like this. We'll implement those soon. But for now, let's deal with the rest of the UI. And that bottom part is actually super exciting because here we're going to have a transcript. You know how when you're speaking with somebody, sometimes it's tough to understand specific words, especially if you're learning about something that has new vocabulary. Well, to make your learning even better, you'll be hearing it through voice, but you'll also be seeing the transcript in real time. So let's head below this section and let's create another section with a class name equal to transcript. It'll have a div with a class name equal to transcript -message and no scroll bar. And within here, we'll be able to map through our messages. But for now, I'll just leave this empty until we actually set up the call. Finally, we can head below this div and create one self-closing div with a class name of transcript-fade. So we let people know that the transcript, it's fading, so we can only see the current sentence of what we're talking about. Okay, great. Now let's actually hook it up by implementing the functionalities within these functions that we have created above. First, we can deal with the handle call and handle disconnect to be able to start and end the call. First things first, on the handle call, I'll set the call status to be equal to call status dot connecting. And then we want to override our assistant by saying const assistant overrides will be equal to an object where we can provide variable values. And those will be a subject, a topic, and the style. So our assistant knows what they're talking about. And we can also say client messages, give me back the transcript, and server messages will be equal to an empty array. Then we have to call vapi.start, and here we'll have to pass the assistant configuration, which I already shared with you within utils.ts. If you check this out, you'll notice that we have this getSubjectColor, which we used a lot, but then we also have this commented out configure assistant function. We'll uncomment it and go through it together line by line. Don't forget to also uncomment the imports. The only reason why I provided this to you is because it has a lot of text that we have to copy and paste in order to train our AI assistant to be the best tutor possible. But everything else, we're going to go over line by line. So what do we have here? Well, first of all, we're trying to get access to the ID of the voice that we want to use. And we actually have two voices right here, or you can think of it as four. We have two male voices, male casual and male formal, and two female voices, one casual and one formal, and that is the default one called Sarah. So here we tap into this object of different voices, and then depending on the voice, which is either male or female, and the style, we choose the voice ID which we want to use. Once that is done, we are ready to set up our Vapi assistant. We give it a name called companion. We give it the first message that it's going to say, such as, hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about topic. Now, that topic is a variable value that we're passing into the assistant. If we head back into our ID page right here, you'll notice that we're passing these three variable values, the subject, the topic, and the style. And we can use them then within that bot. So I'll head back over into our utils. And you can see that the first one we're using is the topic. Next, we can choose the transcriber that'll give us the text version of the conversation we're having or what the assistant is saying. And then what is super cool is that out of the box, Vapi gives us with their 11 Labs provider. So you don't have to create an account on there. It just comes pre-built in. I played with different settings a bit, such as the stability, similarity boost, speed, and style, and I found those values to work the best. Finally, we choose the model for the actual conversation. I'm using a GPT-4 OpenAI model, and here we give it a system role, saying that you're a highly knowledgeable tutor teaching a real-time voice session with a student. Your goal is to teach the student about the topic and subject. Guidelines: stick to the given topic, which is a dynamic variable, and subject, and teach the student about it. Keep the conversation flowing smoothly while maintaining control. From time to time, make sure that the student is following you and understands you. Break down the topic into smaller parts and teach the student one part at a time. Keep your style of conversation, and then either formal or casual. Keep your responses short, like in a real voice conversation. Do not include any special characters in your response. This is a voice conversation. You can think of this as sort of an AI's brain. It tells it what to do, what to know, and how to behave. This particular one is working pretty good, but you can tweak it to your needs if you want to. And you can experiment with some more injected variables. For now, I found the topic, subject, and conversational style to be more than enough. And now we are returning that assistant. So if we head back over here, we can say vapi.start, and we can call the configure assistant function. And to it, we need to provide the two props it wants, which is going to be the voice and the style. And outside of it, we can also provide the assistant overrides, which we have declared right here. It's complaining a bit about the assistant override types, saying that the client messages should be an object, but I think this could be a possible TypeScript error, so I'll just say ts expect error to let it know that the type is good. Perfect. So now we're handling the call start, and on disconnect, we can just say set call status to be equal to call status dot finished, and we can initiate a vapi.stop method, which will stop the call. So now what do you say that we give it a shot? I'll click start session, It says connecting, and you can see that it is blinking right here.
Today we'll be talking about figuring out server versus client components in Next.js and React.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, let's first define server and client components in this context. In React, traditionally, all components run on the browser or client side. In Next.js, you also have server-side components, which run on the server before sending the page to the browser. Does that make sense so far?
It makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that there's two different types of components and they're being rendered on the client or on the server?
Exactly. Server components handle heavy processing and can fetch data directly from databases. They also don't send JavaScript to the client, so they're faster. Meanwhile, client components handle interactivity like buttons, forms, or dynamic updates in the browser. Does that sound clear so far?
Yeah, that is actually super clear. Thank you so much. Okay, there we go. I just ended the session, and this was such a great educational session. For my taste, it does speak a bit too slow, but that's because it wants to teach us in the best way possible. So if you want to, you can maybe tweak this to speak a bit faster, or you can change the way that it interacts with you. But it actually very nicely listened to my questions and followed up with additional relevant information on the topic. So this is absolutely amazing. The last thing we have to do to fully finalize this teaching assistant is to implement the transcript. To do that, we can head over right here where we have the onMessage function, and we can accept a message of a type message right here. Vapi's SDKs return all kinds of different messages during the conversation. Information about events, errors, used functions, and so on. But here, we're looking specifically for transcript and saving it to our messages array. So I'll say if message.type is triple equal to transcript, and if message.transcript type is triple equal to final, in that case, we want to create a new message, which will be equal to role of message.role. It can be either us or the bot. And the content will be equal to message.transcript. And finally, we can add it to the messages array by saying set messages. Let's create that state field at the top. Use state snippet of messages, set messages, at the start equal to an empty array, and the type will be saved messages array, like this. Perfect. So now we can set messages into an array, add this new message, and spread all the previous messages. Now, when you want to set the state using the previous version of the same state, you get access to it as part of a callback function called prev. So we spread the previous state and we add a new message. So now on message, we're adding this new message. And right here below, where we have the handle call, that's where it makes sense to only provide us with the transcript messages. And then finally, we can head under the JSX part where it says messages, and we can get access to the current messages within the state by saying messages.map, where we get each individual message. And for each message, we can open up a new function block and check if message.role is equal to assistant. In that case, we can return a new p tag that'll have a key equal to message.content and a class name of maxsm text-sm. And here we can render the name of the assistant by running the name.split based on a space and only taking the first part of it. But let's fix this issue where I missed a parenthesis right here. And also we need to close the split right here. I'll expand my editor to the full view so we can see it a bit more easily. So what we're doing is we're splitting the name based on the space to only get the first name. And then on it, we want to call the dot replace, where we're going to replace any dots or commas globally across that string with an empty string, like this. So I'll put it into multiple lines just so it's easier to see. Name.split, dot replace, and then finally we end it right here. Now, this is just the name, so we have to also say colon and then render the message.content. This is if the assistant is speaking, but if we are speaking, then I'll say else. I'll also create a p tag with a key equal to message.content and a class name equal to text-primary on Mac's small devices, text-sm, and I'll make it say username saying message.content, like this. Oh, and since we're in JSX, we actually have to return this, like this. And then at the bottom, we have this transcript fade, which is just a div with a gradient background, which moves to transparency, creating the illusion of a fading text. So I'll show it to you in action very soon. So with that in mind, we have everything we need to test out our assistant. And the only way to do it properly is by going full screen and starting a session. We actually already tested this one out. So what do you say that we create another? I'll head over onto my homepage and create a new companion. What should we learn about today? Let's dive into some maths. I'll give it the name of Mathy, the math expert, and it should help us with understanding the concept of infinity in mathematics. I'm gonna use a female formal voice, and the session should last, well, let's do it 2 minutes, just to see how much we can learn in about 2 minutes. I'll click Build Your Companion, and we automatically get redirected to it in the math section. It says Mathy the Math Expert, and we can start our session. So let's give it a go.
Hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about understanding the concept of infinity in math.
Sounds good, let's go.
Great. To start off, infinity is a concept that describes something without any limit. In mathematics, it's not a number in the traditional sense, but rather an idea that represents boundlessness or endlessness. Would you like an example to make this clearer?
Yeah, I sure would.
All right. Imagine counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on. You can keep counting forever and there is no end. That endless quality is what we refer to as infinity. Does that example help?
It does, but I want to dive a bit deeper.
Perfect. Let's go a bit deeper. In math, infinity is often used to describe things like unending sequences or sizes that are unmeasurably large, but here's the key idea. While infinity is endless, it is not a number you can calculate with like 5 or 10. It's more of a concept. Do you follow?
Yeah, I do follow. I'm guessing that you're being very brief because I gave you only 2 minutes to teach me this, right?
Exactly. I'm keeping explanations concise since we're working with limited time. Would you like me to focus on any specific aspect of infinity?
No, I think this is it. We can end the session here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad we could cover it. Have a great day.
Perfect. Well, this was a very quick one, and I immediately noticed how the AI assistant tweaked its explanations based on the time limit we gave it. This is perfect. Now, if I start the session one more time, I want to see if I can turn on or off my microphone.
Hello. Let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about understanding the concept of infinity in math.
But we do get an issue right here.
All right, what issue are you facing? Does it relate to infinity or something else?
No, it's something else. I'm fixing the way that I can mute myself when speaking with you.
Okay, let me know once you're ready and we can begin with the topic.
Perfect. I think the issue is just with the key that we're providing to the message. So if we head back over here, where we're providing the key to the message, we can also get access to the index of the message. And then instead of a message.content, we can provide the index right here as both of these keys. So now if we go back, we can try to turn on the mic or turn it off, but it actually doesn't work because we haven't yet activated the Vapi session. It says Vapi does not exist. So to fix this, I'll make this button disabled if the call status is not equal to call status dot active. So only if it is, then it should be enabled. Oh, and I just noticed that I passed it over to a p tag. It should actually be passed over to this button. Now, if you head back, it's not going to do anything if you click on it if you're not within the session. But if you start the session,
hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about understanding the concept of...
There we go. There you have it. We have a fully functional AI teaching assistant teaching you about anything you want to learn about. I gotta say, this is out of this world. Just the ability to go ahead and build your voice companion, somebody that you can speak with about anything you want to learn about, And it's not just like somebody's reading things out to you from a textbook or you're seeing them on the screen. You can have an actual conversation with the instructor, have follow-up questions, or just say that something is unclear, or maybe say that you're bored with the current explanation and they're not going to get mad. They're going to give you another better explanation. They're going to cater their education exactly to your learning style. And based off of these two companions we have tried so far, I gotta say, it is working perfectly. This was one of the longest lessons of the course, but at the same time, the one that allowed us to focus on all the core functionalities of our app. I hope you liked it. Now that we've implemented all the major app's functionalities, there's a lot of stuff that can break. So for that reason, to make this app truly production ready, and to make sure that it doesn't break for users when they actually want to test it out, and if it does break so we can very quickly fix it, I'll teach you how we can integrate Sentry into your app. So if and when the code breaks, we can fix it faster. Click the link down in the description to be able to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing. And if you do that, you'll get 50,000 free errors, which should be more than enough to test with. So just create your account, and once you're in, you'll be redirected to your dashboard. As you can see, I'm using Sentry for many of our projects, including the JS Mastery Pro platform. Now, you could go ahead and click Create Project on top right, but what I prefer to do is just take your current organization URL and add onboarding. This will redirect you to a customized Sentry onboarding. So go ahead and click Start. And now you can choose the platform that you want to monitor. In this case, it's super easy. We'll go with Next.js. Next, you'll be given the automatic configuration string that you can just copy, head back over into your application and paste, and press enter. It'll ask you whether you want to install the Sentry installer, so just say yes, why, and then proceed with the update. A new browser window will appear asking you to authenticate and to choose your project, so just create a new one called Converso. And unfortunately, I got an error saying that there is a new log right here within our code base, Sentry installation error, that says that we could try to use force to make it work. Now we can rerun this command, but I'll remove the last part, which is the -- project, so it still allows us to choose the other one within our organization within the browser, but I'll add the -- force at the end. I'll say yes, continue, and log me into my account. I'll select JSM Converso as my project, but I'll add the -- force at the end, and I'll start with sudo in case it needs some additional permissions in order to set it up within my workspace. So I'll run it and enter my password. It's going to ask us whether we want to continue, say yes, and we already have an account. So it'll open it up within the browser, and we can choose our project. Now back within our terminal, it looks like it's installing it, and it's asking us a couple of questions. Do you want to route Sentry requests in the browser through your Next.js server to avoid ad blockers? Well, this can be super helpful if you want to have very detailed tracking, but it can increase your server load and hosting bill, so for now I'll say no. Do you want to enable tracing to track the performance of your app? I'll say yes. Do you want to enable session replays to get a video-like reproduction of errors during a user session? Definitely. Do you want to create an example page? Well, yes, let's do that as well. There's a little note on older versions of Next.js. I'll click I understand. It's going to ask us whether we're using CI/CD tool, so select yes. And now it's going to give us the token that we can now copy, and we'll be able to add it within our .env. So before I click yes, I'll head over to my .env.local, and I'll add a Sentry API key by saying Sentry Auth token. And now I'll say yes, continue, I configured it. Perfect. You can validate your setup by restarting your developer environment and visiting the Sentry example page. So let me do just that. I will reload my app, and I'll head over to Sentry example page. There we go. I think this is the only time in our career where we're going to purposefully throw an error within our application. So I'll say throw sample error. There we go. It was sent to Sentry, and we can see it right here. Sentry example frontend error. This error is raised on the frontend on the example page. Now to finish up with the onboarding, you can click view sample error, and your UI might look a bit different from what mine looks like. But don't worry about that. You can still head over to your projects, find Converso, and after some time, you should be able to see one front-end error and one API error. So now you can click on the front-end error to explore it, and just take a look at the amount of details we're getting back about the user that caused that error. We can see where that error was caused. We can see under which environment. We can check out the browser. It was Chrome, the URL, the environment, and that's only where we begin, because you can also see the IP address that caused the error and even the version of the operating system. Next, you can see the exact stack trace that led to the error, and even a session replay allowing you to see exactly what your user was seeing when the error happened. And here it is. Then you can explore the breadcrumbs leading to that error, and even what was showing in the console at the time that the error happened. The amount of details that you're getting right here is crazy. And if you want to head over to the API error, you're going to get a completely different set of data points, such as that this server was being ran on Node, and you can see exactly from where in the code it was triggered. Alongside issue tracking, you can also see your page load times for your applications, as well as the API latency, the web vitals, so you can improve your loading times, all the network requests that happen within your application, and how long they took, and even special insights for backend, where you can track exactly how many users are making which requests and whether they're working or not working. Okay, Sentry can do a lot of stuff, but what does this mean for you? Well, it means that as soon as somebody goes into your application and breaks something that you didn't anticipate they're going to be able to break, you'll immediately know that a random user somewhere across the world broke something within your application and is having difficulties, without needing to send them an email and ask them what they did. Because let's be honest, they can never tell us exactly what they did. You'll know exactly what happened, and you'll be able to fix it quick and push a fix to production, therefore improving your user's experience, and most importantly, not making them head over to their account billing and cancel their plan. That's why Sentry is a must on any modern SaaS application where you want to increase your customer satisfaction and keep them subscribed for a long time. And if you go back to the app, there's nothing else that has to be set up. Sentry added their own setup, which is now tracking your application, making sure that it is error-free. Super simple, yet so crucial. Now that we've implemented our app's primary feature, which is the conversation with the AI coach, well, we have to store that conversation into the session history so that later on we can display it right here on our homepage under recently completed sessions. So head over into our details page and then into the companion component. Here, under the first use effect, when we ended the call, we also want to add it to the session history. So we have to do that right here. Add to session history, and then specify the companion ID that we want to add to that history. So we have to implement this new server action within lib actions companion actions, and then below get companion, I'll create a new one, export const add to session history. It'll be equal to an asynchronous function that accepts the companion ID of a type string. Within here, we first need to get access to our currently logged in user. So I'll say user ID is equal to await auth coming from Clerk. Next, we want to create an instance of Supabase. So I'll say create Supabase client. And then we want to fetch the data from the current database history by saying const destructure the data and the error and make it equal to await Supabase dot from session underscore history dot insert. And we want to insert a companion underscore ID of companion ID and user underscore ID of user ID. That way we can get the session history exactly for that user and that companion. Next, if there is an error, in that case, we can just throw a new error with the error message. But if there's no errors, we can just return the data about that session. Now, after we add the session to the history, we also have to be able to fetch it. So I'll say export const get recent sessions, and that'll be equal to an asynchronous function that accepts the limit by default set to 10. And it also creates a new Supabase instance by saying create Supabase client. And we can try to fetch some other data and the error by saying await Supabase dot from session history table. I only want to search for companions with this specific companion ID, and I want to return everything for it. And then we can also order it. So that order by created at, and we can do it not in an ascending way. So I'll say ascending to false, rather it'll be descending from newest to oldest. And I'll limit it to our current limit, which is set to 10. Then again, if we have an error, we can simply throw that new error with the error message. But if we have successfully fetched the companions, we can return data.map, where we get each individual companion, but we have to destructure it because we have the data which contains the ID, the companion ID, and the whole companion. But since we just need the companion, we can just destructure it and return the companions. I'm missing an S right here. Perfect. So this is getting all the recent sessions for a specific companion ID. But now we also need to get all recent user sessions. So what I'll do is I will duplicate this entire get recent sessions function, and I'll rename it to get user sessions, where instead of the limit, we will accept the user ID of a type string and also a limit of 10. We will again create a Supabase client and fetch data from session history. We will select the companion ID, but we will only do it where the .eq user underscore ID matches the user ID that we're getting through props. And everything else will be the same. Perfect. Now get back to our on-call end within the companion component and uncomment what we just put here, and make sure to import the add to session history coming from our actions. Now back within our application, let's have a session with one of our companions. I'll go with Matthew. And now start a call and wait for the AI to respond to you at least once.
Hello. Let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about understanding the concept of infinity in math.
Okay, so we're doing this so that the conversation can register on Vapi's end. Then we can end the call by clicking the End Session button. And now it should have been registered and it should have been added to our session history. You can check that out by heading over to Supabase for JSM SaaS project. You'll see that we have two different tables. So now head over to session history and take a look at this. We have one session by this user with this companion. That's everything we need. But now we want to show this data somewhere where it matters. And that's going to be our homepage. So head back over to app.page.tsx, which is our home, where we're currently rendering the fake data. Instead of rendering this fake data, remove these two additional companion cards. And what we want to do instead is just fetch all the companions and the recent sessions by saying const companions is equal to await get all companions, to which we need to pass a limit of just 3 because we were showing the 3 companions at the top. And then we can also fetch the recent sessions companions by making it equal to await get recent sessions, and to it we can pass 10 as the limit. Make sure to add async to this function because we are actually waiting for these pieces of data to come back from the server. And now we can put it to use by mapping over our companions and displaying a companion card for each one. So say companions.map, and then for each companion, automatically return a new companion card. So I'll actually use this one with the fake data, but I will clear that fake data right here and simply spread all the properties of a companion. We also have to give it a key since we're mapping over it, which is going to be companion.id. And for the color, we have to pass it separately because we have to call the getSubjectColor and then pass the companion.subject so we can generate a color based off of the subject. Now, if you get back to homepage, you'll see that we have two popular companions. And now we have to scroll down and fetch the recent sessions as well. We can do that very easily by passing the real recent sessions companions to this companions list, which we already created, which will then put them all in a table. So if you head back, you can see that we only have one recent session, which is exactly right. Now, just to test whether it's working properly, let's add one more companion and then have a conversation with them. This time, let's learn a bit about science. I'll call it science tutor. And we want to learn about the most interesting things in science. A bit generic, but hey, let's see what it does. We'll go with a casual style and let's make it 15-minute. I'll start the session.
Hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about the most interesting things in science.
Okay, what do you have for me?
Let's start with black holes. They're regions in space where gravity is so strong, nothing, not even light, can escape. Fascinating, right?
Okay, yeah. Black holes are super interesting, so I would like to learn a bit more about that. But now I gotta demo the app to people learning. So let's see what do we have. Yep, the new science tutor had been added right here, and the recent session has been added to the table as well. Perfect. Now in the next lesson, we can focus on the My Journey tab, or in other words, the profile page. Let's implement our profile page where the currently logged in user can see how many sessions they've completed, how many companions they've created, and they can see a list of their most recent lessons. To implement it, we'll have to modify our profile. So let's first implement an action that would allow us to fetch the companions that this user has created. Once again, it'll be very similar to these last two functions. So let me just duplicate it once more and let me rename it to get user companions. It'll accept just the user ID. We create a Supabase client and we make a fetch not to the session history, but to the companions that this user has created. From them, we can select everything that we can get back. So just select. And the EQ will be equal to author, which matches the user ID, because we only want to get the companions that that user has created. We check for the errors, and if there aren't any, we return the data. Now to show these companions, we will use the accordion component from ShadCN. So let's go ahead and install it. Within our terminal, simply run npx ShadCN add latest add accordion and use legacy peer deps. Once it gets installed, head over to our profile page, which is under My Journey, create a new main page with a class name equal to on min.lg devices W3 or 4, and then create a new section right within it. Below this section, we want to copy and paste the usage of the accordion. So first, I'll get over the imports, and then I will copy the actual usage part and save it. Now, for some reason, when I rerun the application, I got this cannot find OpenTelemetry core package, which I believe Sentry is using, so we have to go ahead and install it. So just run npm install, and then paste that package name right here if you're using it as well. If you install it and run the application, it'll spin it up so we can head over to the My Journey page, and you can see this accordion. But now let's focus on the rest of the profile page, and that first requires us to fetch the user details. So I'll say const user is equal to await current user coming from Clerk, and to be able to use that, we have to turn this into an async function. Next, if there is no user, they cannot see that page, so I will simply redirect over to /sign-in. After that, we want to fetch all of the companions that belong to that user by saying await get user companions, to which we have to pass the user.id and also the session history of that user, which we can get by saying await get user sessions, to which we can pass the user.id. Thankfully, we have already created all of those server actions that give us that data. Now we can style it further by giving this section a class name equal to flex justify dash between gap of 4 on max small devices flex column and items-center. Within it, we can render an image that'll have a source of user.imageURL and an alt tag of user.firstname, a width of a 110 and a height of 110 as well. And let's fix this class name. If you do this, you should be able to see our profile photo. Below the image, I'll render another div with a class name equal to flex, flex-call, and a gap of 2. And there we want to display an h1 that'll have a class name equal to font-bold and text-2XL. There we want to render the user.firstname as well as the user.lastname. And below the h1, we can render a p tag that'll have a class name of text-sm, text-muted-foreground, and here we can render the user.email addresses 0.email address. So now we have both the full name and the email. Now after this section, I also wanted to have a div that would have a class name equal to flex, a gap of 4, and items-center. And then we can put both the image and this div containing the username and the email within it. So that way we can achieve a better layout. Now let's go 2 divs down, still within the section, and let's create another div with a class name equal to flex and a gap of 4 in between the elements, with another div with a class name equal to border, border-black, rounded-LG, padding of 3, a gap of 2, flex, flex-call, so they appear one below another, and h-fit, so we can fit it within its current height. Within it, I'll display another div with a class name of flex, gap of 2, and items-center, within which I'll display an image with a source of /icons, /check.svg, with an alt tag of checkmark, a width of 22, a height of 22, and we can close it right here. What does this check mean? Well, we'll display a check for every single lesson that we have completed. So below this image, I'll display a p tag with a class name of text-2XL, font-bold, and I'll render the session history .length to see how many sessions we've had. So in this case, it is 2. And then below this div, we can render another div and say lessons completed. 2 lessons completed. Perfect. Now I will duplicate this entire div with the border all the way to its ending div, and I'll paste it below. This time, we won't show a check, but rather we'll show a cap SVG, and this one will show not a session history.length, but rather the companions.length, so we can see how many companions has this user created. So I'll say companions created. And now we have 2 lessons completed and 3 companions created. This will be super useful for tracking whether our users have crossed their billing features. For example, with a small plan, maybe they can only create 3 companions, but if they upgrade, they can create 5. Or maybe unlimited, who knows? That's the exact point of SaaS apps. You're the one to define what will be available within a specific billing plan. And finally, we have this accordion below the section with a type of multiple, not collapsible, where the accordion item will be set to recent. Accordion trigger will have a class name equal to text-2XL and font-bold, and it'll render the recent sessions. Then, under accordion content, we can simply re-render the companions list, which we created before, pass to it a title of recent sessions, and also pass the companions equal to session history. If we do that, automatically we'll be able to render a nice looking list of recent sessions. Let's also render a new accordion item just below this one and give it a value of companions with an accordion trigger that'll say not recent sessions, but my companions. And then we can also display the number of companions by saying companions.length. You know how typically you can see the number before you click on it? So for example, in this case, you have 3. And now below the accordion trigger, we can display the accordion content within which we'll just render the companions list component, this time with the title of my companions, companions equal to companions that this user has created, and save it. So now you can see recent sessions as well as my companions. But you can notice that the title always says recent sessions right here in the companions list. And that's because we haven't modified it right here where it says recent sessions. Instead, we should have used the real title that we passed to it. So now it says recent sessions and my companions. It looks great on mobile, but when expanded, it looks even better on desktop because you can see all of your recent sessions and immediately get back into them by clicking on them, or you can just view the companions you created that you maybe want to revisit. And with that in mind, we now have a full profile page where we can see the number of lessons completed and companions created. But if you remember properly, back on our subscription page, we listed a specific number of sessions and companions that each user can create at a specific point in time. So now is the time that we enforce those rules. We allowed our users to be able to authenticate into our application. We allowed them to create sessions and companions, and we're tracking the number of the lessons completed and companions created. But now is the time that we actually enforce our billing options. See, on our subscription page, we have 3 different plans. Instead of having this be a div, I'll turn it into a main tag so we get some additional spacing around it. And I'll zoom it in so you can see it better. Under the basic plan, a user should only be able to create 3 companions and have 10 conversations with these 3 companions. If we take a look at our current journey, we're almost there, right? We should not be able to create a 4th companion. But if we now go to home and try to create it, well, it actually redirects me to the companion builder and I would be able to create a 4th one. Sure, right now I am a core learner, but to show you how we should apply these limits, let me switch back over to the basic plan. Since Clerk Billing is still in beta, it is possible that sometimes you'll get this internal server error, but this didn't happen super often, and I'm sure that in no time, this will be fixed. So very soon, we'll switch over back to the basic plan, but in the meantime, let me show you how we can enforce those limits within our application. So if the user crossed a specific limit, then we point them to upgrade to the next bigger plan. Back within our code, head over to the companion.actions.ts file, and at the bottom, we'll implement a new server function called export const new companion permissions. It'll be equal to an async action like all the other ones. Then, within it, we have to get access to the currently logged in user ID, as well as to the has method coming from Clerk, which will be equal to await auth. On Clerk Docs for Clerk Billing for B2C SaaS applications, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve, we have already enabled billing, set up our payment gateway, created a plan, and added features to that plan. We have also created a pricing page, but now we have to control access with features and plans. And that is something that is very hard to do within your SaaS apps because there are so many features, different plans, and you have to monitor which user belongs to which membership plan and which features does that membership plan cover. Thankfully, Clerk makes it super simple using the has and protect methods. The only thing you have to say is has access to this specific plan or has access to this specific feature. Let me show you how we can implement it within the code. I'll also get access to the current Supabase instance by saying Supabase is equal to create Supabase client, and by default, I'll set the limit to be equal to 0. But then, using the has functionality, I will check whether the user has access to the Pro plan. Pro plan is our biggest plan, which offers the creation of unlimited companions. So in this case, I will just return true because this user can create as many as we want. But else if the user has access to a feature called 3 companion limit, in that case, we want to set the limit to 3. And I'll add another else if and check if they have access to the 10 companion limit feature. In that case, we'll set the limit over to 10. And if you're wondering, how did I come across these names, 3 companion limit and 10 companion limit with underscores? Well, those have to match exactly with the features that you have within your Clerk Billing dashboard. So head over to your Clerk dashboard, configure, and then scroll down to Billing Subscription Plans. Head over to the basic plan and find the 3 active companions feature. And in this case, looks like the slug. And this slug has to match this one right here. In this case, they're not matching, so let's fix it. 3 companion limit. And save. If the slug doesn't match, it'll not properly recognize the amount of credits that the user has. And let's also head over to the core learner and set the 10 active companions to say 10 companion limit. Update and save. Perfect. Now we can get access to the amount of companions this user has created within the database by saying const destructure the data and the error is equal to await Supabase dot from companions dot select ID and give us back the exact count. Only return those where the author is equal to the current user ID. Then, if we get back an error, then we can simply throw a new error with an error message. Else, if there aren't any errors, we can get access to the companion count that we have created so far, which is under data.length. And finally, if the companion count is greater than or equal to the limit that we have set within Clerk Billing, then we will return false. Else, we will return true, meaning they can or they can't access that feature. And now that we have created this new function that checks for the user's ability to create a new companion, we can now head over to the new companion page. That is right here under companions, new. And I will call this server action right here at the top by saying const can create companion and make it equal to await new companion permissions. And then based off of this variable, we can either show the entire article with the companion builder right here by using a ternary. So if can create companion, then we show this article, same what we have been showing before to the users that were actually able to create them. Or if we can't create any more, we can show a new article with a class name equal to companion limit, and we can close it right here, where we can render an image with a source of images limit.svg with an alt tag of companion limit reached, a width of about 360 and a height of about 230. And below it, I'll render a div that'll have a class name equal to CTA badge, and it'll say upgrade your plan, so that we eventually get to a page that looks like this. Upgrade your plan, you reached your limit, upgrade to create more companions and premium features, and then a button that will lead us to Clerk's pricing page. So below this div, I'll create an H1 that'll simply say you've reached your limit. Then below it, I'll create a P tag that'll say you've reached your companion limit, upgrade to create more companions and access premium features. And then below it, I'll render a link coming from Next Navigation with an href pointing to subscription and a class name equal to BTN primary with a full width and justify center, so we can see it right here in the center of our screen. And this link will simply say upgrade my plan. Perfect. So now, just to be able to test it, I will head over to New Companion Permissions, and since I'm currently on the core plan, I will change this 10 companion limit to about, let's do 3, because I have created 3 so far, and I should not be able to create more. So if we head back over to our application, head over to Build a New Companion, you can now see companion limit reached. It looks like our image didn't render properly. That's because I missed a / right here. There we go. Upgrade your plan. I can even zoom out. And it looks like I missed a BTN class right here on the button. There we go. So now I am blocked for creating more companions. And what I can do instead is just navigate over to the subscription, which is when I can switch to another plan and then be able to create more. For the time being, I'll just go back and switch this limit back to 10 for the core users. So if I do that, since I'm a core learner right now, and I have only created 3 companions, I should be able to go back and create a 4th one. This is working like a charm. And for every new user that gets created, all of this will be managed automatically for you without you having to think about different permissions, plans, and features. The fact that the user account is directly connected to the billing, which is then connected to the features of that plan, is just crazy. And now that the Clerk team implemented this, it seems like it was a plan all along because these features tie together perfectly. And at this point, I think that we can call this application a true SaaS app. Now, you've probably noticed that the Figma design contains these bookmark icons at the top of every card. It allows you to add it to your companion library and then access it very simply by seeing only the companions that you have bookmarked. A pretty cool feature that you can maybe add to a Pro or Elite plan. But this is a feature that we haven't implemented yet, and that's for a reason. It's a task that I have left for you to do, to test how much you have learned during this course. Of course, I'll provide the final code, and if you get stuck, on this video kit, somewhere near the bottom, I'll also provide you with some hints on how we can make it happen. But take a second and try to implement it on your own first. You can do it. Now that we're done with our app, the last remaining step is to deploy to the internet so that everyone can see it and actually pay for your features. To do that, you first have to create a new repo on GitHub. If you've been following carefully, then you know that we have already done that before. Oh, look, some of you have already given this repo a star. So go ahead and push your code to GitHub by following the steps that you get when creating a new repo. Once your repo is up, head over to vercel.com and create a new project. If you published it recently, it should appear right at the top. So just click import. It'll automatically recognize that you used Next.js to publish it. And just before we deploy it, you can enter your environment variables right here. So head over to your .env.local, copy all of the variables together, and just paste them into the first field, which will automatically generate them right here. And then click deploy. This process will take about a minute, so let's pause right here, and I'll be right back. After about 2 minutes, we'll just get a little warning that says that some of our TypeScript types are not met. Thankfully, a fix for this is super simple. You just have to head over to your .next.js config, and above images, say TypeScript, and then just say ignore build errors, set to true. We've used TypeScript on this entire project, and we've been very careful of the types, but it is possible that 1 or 2 slipped. So just to make sure that our build doesn't fail like it did, we can just add this little fix right here. And then type git add dot git commit -m fix TypeScript, and then git push. If you head back over to your projects, you'll notice that this will automatically re-trigger a deployment on your SaaS app. So we'll have to wait 2 more minutes, and hopefully this time it builds properly. Oh, the second time the error is still here, and it looks like it is TypeScript related, but it is also ESLint. So the same thing that we've done before within our next config, we have to do it again, but this time for ESLint by saying ESLint ignore during builds, set to true. And for TypeScript, it is ignore build errors, set to true. So if you fix this, we can one more time do a git add dot git commit -m fix ESLint, and then git push, which will once again, for the third time, re-trigger a deployment. And hopefully, third time's the charm. And there we go, our build is now ready. If we go to Project Overview and click Visit, you can see that we're now live on the domain name that Vercel has given to us. So let's go ahead and try to sign in. I'll continue with Google. This time I selected a new account. And you can see that this account is still on a basic plan. I can, of course, use the companions that other person has created and speak with them and learn from them, but I can also build my own 3 companions. So let's give it a shot with one. I'll actually name this companion Adrian, and I'll say coding, and I'll say teach me how to land a web developer job. The voice will be a very casual male, and I'll set the estimated duration to about 15 minutes. Just like that, a new companion has been created, and we can speak with it.
Hello, let's start the session. Today we'll be talking about teach me how to land a web developer job.
Well, yeah, I will teach you that. And to everybody watching this video, I think we have done an amazing Converso application, and you're a part of that SaaS app. What do you think?
It sounds like you're working on something exciting. So let's dive into landing that web developer job. First things first, do you have a portfolio ready with your best work?
Okay, you can see that Adrian knows what he is talking about. A portfolio is a must-have for any developer. And we have many portfolios as part of JS Mastery Pro, where you can generate a full learning path catered to your preferences, and then ultimately head over to landing that developer job at the end. But since you came to the end of this course, which is all about SaaS apps, here you have built and developed a learning management system SaaS with AI. But there are many different SaaS applications that you can create. So for that reason, I created a pro course called Build and Launch Your SaaS App in 7 Days. And already I've added tons of different lessons on how you can approach creating and monetizing any kind of an idea that you have. The link is down in the description, so go ahead and check it out. With that said, thank you so much for watching and for coming to the end of this amazing course. I'll see you in the next one, and have a wonderful day.